what does cheese, Cartoon Network, and the extraterrestrial have in common? The answer should be nothing, but there in fact is a connection between these three things. Back in 2007, Cartoon Network aired a month-long special that involved 5 of their current programs on the air, where the central theme had aliens quote-unquote invading them, and for some reason, cheese is involved. And no, I'm not talking about the character of Cheese from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, even though he is involved, and I'll get to all that in a moment. But these 5 shows involved were Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Ed, Ed and Eddie, My Gym Partner's a Monkey, Camp Lazlo, and The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. Each one of these shows would have a special episode that involved aliens being brought in to tie this special event together each week, starting on May 4th, 2007 and ending on May 28th. But what makes this more memorable than the event itself is how everything behind the scenes fell apart. The creators of the shows themselves weren't really wanting to be involved, and for a crossover, it can barely be considered that. Today, let's take a look at how these aliens did invade Cartoon Network along with their programs, how they tried to build it up to be something bigger than it was, and what happened that kind of ruined the original vision this event was going for. Time to get invaded. Imagine, if you will, that Cartoon Network had something big planned. They reached out to a select bunch of their shows and told them that they have to make an episode of their show that involves certain criteria. Cartoon Network would then also have flash games made to be involved in this event, with one for each show to tie in on their website, and the bumpers in between programs would introduce 3 other aliens voiced by Jason DeMarco, Tom Kenny, and Ben Amick, as they would serve as the overall invasion of the network. Well, you don't have to imagine that as it happened, but not in the way of something fun and natural, but off the back of a brand deal that caused Cartoon Network to kind of put this all together, albeit not in a smooth and cohesive way, as it feels a lot more thrown together last minute rather than a thoroughly thought out process. To you or I at the time, we'd know no better. It just seemed like a random fun thing the network was doing leading up to Memorial Day, and hey, aliens are cool, right? So then what's the deal with all the cheese? What we do know now is that this was supposed to be a major multiple week event tie-in between Cartoon Network and Kraft Cheese. Apparently, the 2 companies came together with a plan where Kraft would have this big ongoing advertisement for their various cheese-related products, and every single show would follow the theme of having cheese involved in the plot of the episodes. So not only were you just getting your regular dose of cartoons, but you'd be getting subliminally advertised the entire time. But something happened in the production of all this that led to Kraft pulling back and not wanting to move forward anymore, leaving Cartoon Network stuck with 5 episodes from 5 different shows along with 5 tie-in flash games that all involve aliens wanting cheese and everyone behind the scenes having a bad time making them. We know all this now thanks to the creators eventually speaking about this, like Maxwell Adams really breaking down the situation. So Cartoon Network moved forward with the concept of tying the shows together still, and thus Cartoon Network Invaded was born.
Moon rocks? Why would you moon rocks?
The first piece of the cheese wheel was Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, with the episode titled Cheese A Go-Go. Yes, this episode does involve the character of Cheese now, where he's running around the streets yelling "gotta go" constantly as Frankie sees this and gets him on the bus to help him get to wherever he's gotta go. But after she's done running the rest of her errands, as they then pick up Mac and Blue after they get out of a movie where they saw a film called Brain-Sucking Aliens from the Moon, which was about an alien invasion where the aliens presumably wanted to suck out some brains. Both Coco and Eduardo get picked up next from their dentist appointment, and Eduardo is tripping off that good stuff and starts mentioning references to the movie that Mac and Blue just saw. At the same time, Blue is flipping through a magazine that is filled with all the fake or over-exaggerated headlines for people who want juicy gossip to read, where he stumbles on a page that says aliens are indeed attacking, and the image attached looks oddly similar to Cheese. And with how Blue is as a character, he now starts thinking that Cheese is one of those aliens, and is here to suck out people's brains, naturally. This leads Blue to bringing Cheese to an observatory in the efforts of trying to contact the rest of the aliens, but ends up getting arrested for taking over the observatory for those alien-related purposes, putting him in a cell with the other characters who have also been arrested for other various shenanigans that happen throughout the episode. And while this feels completely pointless to the event, like where are the aliens, Blue's meddling in the observatory does end up contacting real aliens that now come to Earth in order to find Cheese. Yep, Blue caused the event to start by trying to to contact aliens regarding the imaginary friend Cheese, and now the aliens are coming looking for just General Cheese. I feel like just watching the episode you can tell that it may have been another episode completely about the friends running into various problems throughout the city, stressing out Frankie, but had to now rework the idea to involve an alien conspiracy, to now bring in the aliens that will make appearances in the other episodes. But oh well, that's the first entry into the Cartoon Network Invaded event. It's an alright episode of Foster's Home on its own, but next we move over to Ed, Edd and Eddy with the episode The Eds Are Coming. It's a pretty wild episode, especially in comparison to the rest of Ed, Edd and Eddy as a whole. Starting off with an over-the-top and joyous dream Jimmy is experiencing until it is heavily interrupted by these massive cutting blades dropping from the sky and begin cutting the cul-de-sac out of the ground, taking Sarah up into the sky away from Jimmy, freaking him out even though it was all just a dream apparently. So he's now freaked out, fully believing that aliens can come and truly invade the neighborhood and rip out the cul-de-sac. The poor dude is going through it. Johnny, on the other hand, ends up heading to Rolf's, where his house is emitting a glowing green light that transitions us to Johnny now freaked out over what he is telling the others that he saw, which was him seeing evidence of aliens invading, and of course, Jimmy rises up to believe him while the others don't. Also, Ed is missing, and Double D says that he has a note from Ed stating he's at Rolf's and needs help. Once a glowing green meteor shoots out of Rolf's house and creates a crater in the ground with Ed crawling out of it, the rest of the kids believe the whole alien thing now and try to figure out a way to stop the aliens, suiting up, preparing MacGyvered together weapons and laying out a trap for the aliens outside of Rolf's house, but nothing was what it seemed. Rolf steps out of the house with an octopus on his head stating that he and his relatives are having a traditional celebration that involves them wearing octopuses or squids on their heads. So things are fine, right? No, they're not, as the end of the episode reveals that the cul-de-sac is hooked up to a spaceship carrying the chunk of land into space. Maybe I like it for the fact that it's Ed, Edd and Eddy and it's one of my favorite shows from my childhood, but in the grand scheme of this event, we still don't see the aliens. There's a lack of cheese urgency here and it's driving me crazy. It may also be the best episode out of these 5 shows, but purely from an entertainment factor. We then move on to the third part of the event with My Gym Partner's a Monkey in the episode That Darn Platypus. Something crashes into an area near the city where it causes a major power outage and cuts out any electricity, and now everyone just walks places and pretends they're still driving, with Adam and his animal friends seeing the main story of a magazine discussing a cul-de-sac being stolen that features the Ed boys on the cover running for their lives as the aliens attack them, which I don't remember that part. And with many of the students at the school already on edge from what is happening, a new student arrives and he's a bit odd, trying to make an impression on everyone as the new kid, as he's constantly making references to possibly being an alien and wanting brain juice. So naturally, it's believed that aliens are real and this new platypus student is an alien. But Adam is the only one to defend him, saying that he is not an alien. But he has to be, right? He's bringing up brain juice, he's acting really suspicious, and he likes cheese. What else could the answer be? Adam fully believes he's an alien though once they're alone and he transforms in front of him into this odd-looking alien creature, causing Adam to run back to his friends, where the platypus now reveals he was just pulling a prank on them. Brain juice is just the name of some drink and everyone can chill out. And Adam totally didn't see what he just saw back there. It was just these props. But then he later flies away in a spacecraft, so he is probably just an alien who was voiced by Gilbert Gottfried. Rest in peace. I know a lot of people dislike this show. I've never had a real issue with it, and this episode is fine, but at least we got an alien appearance finally, so that's a plus. Part 4 of the event brings us to Camp Laszlo in the dual 11-minute episodes Strange Trout from Outer Space and Cheese Orbs, so it's kind of like a 2-for-1 special. The character Samson from the show ends up getting abducted by aliens right away, and they're all looking for cheese. But Samson serves no purpose for the aliens, so they let him go, as 3 trout show up to the camp as new campers, and Samson sure is suspicious about them. So he grabs some friends as he wants their help in proving that these random new campers that all look alike are actually the aliens. Later, the fish trio end up stealing some cheese slices, some totally not Kraft cheese slices, and then escape from the camp. So I guess they were aliens all along. Or not, they were just some cheese-thieving fish, as the friends Samson had help from are revealed to be the aliens all along. And then they leave to go find some cheese elsewhere. And that ends the first segment of this episode, and now I'm hungry for cheese.
You had to Hey there.
For the second part of the episode, Cheese Orbs, the camp across the lake is having their annual cheese ball coming up, but one character named Patsy can literally not attend as she has a cheese allergy and is bummed out due to that. Luckily, an invention made by the character Nina that would shield Patsy from any cheese is given to her so she can go, but Patsy destroys it fairly quickly and gets upset about it, blaming Nina for causing this. Nina later on ends up running into the three aliens looking for cheese, and her sadness about losing her friend goes away as she becomes friends with the aliens, having fun with them, explaining what the cheese ball is to them, which of course has them stick around with her, all the while Patsy is trying to apologize to Nina, but she has no interest in going back to that friend group when she has these cool new alien friends. Patsy tried and tried to break through to Nina, but nothing was working, so she needed to do something drastic, like getting to all the cheese at the cheese ball and eating it so she can have an allergic reaction in hopes of her looking like a cooler alien than the others, and that Nina would finally want to hang out with her and be her friend again. The real aliens end up getting mad that the cheese is gone, and that's basically it. I'm just glad that we got the aliens right from the jump in this, or I guess these episodes, and the second episode gave us more time with them, which was nice. But the episodes are okay. They for sure are the most involved when it comes to the event as a whole so far, but I wouldn't say they stand out for being great episodes or anything. They're just fine. Lastly, we have part 5, the big grand finale with the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy moon the moon. Billy ends up finding himself in a cornfield where there are some crop circles, but it's due to the character of Spurg, who likes to beat up corn for whatever reason, and then both of them end up getting abducted by aliens and experimented on. The next day though, things seem pretty fine. Billy is back home seemingly safe and sound, but now all the dairy products are missing, and Billy just tells them that there's some aliens out there that are stealing all the cheese from Earth since there is no more cheese on the moon, and they believe Billy when he shows them the spaceship he stole to make it back home that is now crashed, along with finding a chip in Billy's brain, and that the Spurg character now has a bomb put inside of him. And then the aliens flat out invade, finally bringing the title of the event to its climactic culmination. The army is fighting back against him, and these aliens are sending out other alien creatures down to the surface who can shoot out cheese whiz from their armpits, which I'm not going to get into why the logic of still needing cheese exists when these creatures do, but we'll bring it back up shortly. The group ends up getting captured and taken to the moon, where the aliens are rebuilding and replenishing it with cheese through the dairy products so that they can have a full moon that will turn them into werewolves, and then they can go and eat everyone on Earth. Look, no one said there was going to be legit logic here for this whole event. The story is presented by that Raven character who pops up from time to time, telling the tales of Billy and Mandy. So all of this could literally be nothing more than a made-up story for the in-universe world of the cartoons. The aliens plot is further revealed to then replace all of the humans with cardboard cutouts, so it looks like the aliens never touched the planet in the first place. Seems like a solid plan to me, makes perfect sense. The episode only gets more ridiculous from there as they are then forced to fight to the death in a gladiator-like pit for the aliens' enjoyment. But they escape that, and the aliens end up turning into the werewolves, with Billy getting attacked and hurt by them, so then he turns into a werewolf. Grim then turns the group into dairy-based superheroes, which was Billy's original idea that no one took seriously, and then they defeat the aliens, use the bomb inside Spurg to blow them up for good, and the day is saved. Life moves on for all the characters. Spurg no longer has a head, but lives on to tell the tale of his heroic deed. Mandy and Grim fight among the stars against other aliens, and Billy just stays a werewolf. The craziness of this episode is on par with the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy as a whole. It's weird, things don't often make sense, but you surely will be entertained. We also get the full ending to the invaded saga, where the group of aliens discuss the events that took place, where things went wrong, and even show that there are characters in the world of each show that are alien secret operatives, which is pretty funny. But even funnier, they have abducted a character from each show to gain their knowledge by sipping on their brain juice. But it just happens to be that the characters are the less than smart ones from each series, causing the aliens to follow suit in that description. But it's not the only ending. There is in fact an alternate ending to it all. This other ending fixes the logic of armpit cheese whiz just being used to fix the moon, so that's nice to see. But then they become trapped in the cheese, with the only way out having to eat the cheese, as we then get to see that there is the kids next door moon base near them, and inside the numbers 1 through 5 are oblivious to everything happening around them as they're just playing video games, kind of explaining why their show couldn't get a special episode to be a part of the event. But it's just cool to see them get a cameo here, even if it is a cut alternate ending to everything. There are little Easter eggs within the show that try to tie everything together, like this whole running background gimmick of Frankie sending out these gifts that end up in the different various shows, but none of them are all that connected outside of dealing with the aliens and, of course, the cheese. I do appreciate the efforts in adding in the bumpers and these 3 random alien characters to make it feel like the network was being taken over, but the episodes themselves aren't really anything that special. and you kind of feel where the force of having to make these episodes would come in. Being told you have to make something that you have no say in the matter does suck, and it clearly doesn't end up resulting in the best output for the final work. Overall, the event isn't anything special. It never did anything that made it feel like a cohesive event. Like, it's fine, it's harmless, and some of the special episodes are pretty fun, but it felt like Cartoon Network didn't know what to do once Kraft backed out of the deal and just had it come out as is. Maybe Kraft didn't like the armpit cheese stuff or something, but whatever it was, Cartoon Network was invaded. The reasons for it all in each episode were silly, but at the end of the day, it's just fun to feel like all these shows exist alongside one another, much like how the Cartoon Network city bumpers portray them all to. It's a mixed bag of pretty good and but I would love to know how you feel about it, so let me know in the comments.
Wait, remember Slugterra? It was the creation of Nerd Corp's entertainment co-founder Asaf Ace Fipka that premiered on Disney XD from 2012 to 2016. This hyper-immersive sci-fi fantasy series takes place in an underground world called Slugterra, in which is between the surface, or the Earth world that we are familiar with, and the Dark Caverns, which is home to a corruptive liquid known as dark water, and imperialist demon-like creatures known as Darkbane. Slugterra is much more hospitable. It is home to slugs, little sentient creatures that are able to transform into powerful versions of themselves when launched faster than 100 miles per hour. Slug slinging is what the sport is called, in which someone uses a launch pad and slugs as their ammo to either duel or fight. I've heard a lot about Slugterra before jumping in to give it a try. The fan base who ride for the show are still there and care greatly for the show, the messages within the show, and the cuteness of the different slugs. So to say I've been eager to check the series out would be a massive understatement. On his 15th birthday, 5 years after his father's disappearance, our main character, Eli Shane, must take up his father's mantle and venture down to Slugterra to keep the peace and pick up where he left off. Ah, yes, the classic hero's journey. No, but seriously, if I was asked to leave Earth's surface, the first thing I would ask is if the new place I'm going has a Brazilian steakhouse. If not, sorry Slugterra, you can take care of yourself. I've got a nice little cut of bottom sirloin to munch on.
Excellent advice.
Nerd Corps, a play on the concept of a nerdy Marine Corps, was founded in 2002 by Ace and Chuck Johnson after they left a larger animation company called Mainframe Entertainment. Nerd Corps was acquired in 2014 by DHX Media, which is now known as Wildbrain. Slugterra would premiere on Disney XD in Canada on September 3rd, 2012. The series ran for technically 6 seasons, with the Slugterra TV movies making up a lot of 2 seasons worth of its content, ending after 63 episodes in 2016. Slugterra was a product of toy company restrictions. In coming up with the series' idea for a boys' action TV series, it was well known that anything involving guns was in most cases a no-go. So the concept of a gun was played around with, naturally, but it was finding a way to make it more akin to something like a Nerf gun. Ace knew he wanted to set his series underground, but decided to deconstruct the concept of a gun and rework the guns to be more like a launch pad. Then, thinking even deeper about the ammo, he decided to think about the ammo as sentient beings that are friends with the people who are launching them. Those two decisions both formed the very core concepts of the series, as well as made it kid-friendly. Ace was also heavily influenced by the concept of westerns and how they were reworked into modern and futuristic settings like Star Wars. So the real challenge in developing the concept of Slugterra had to be finding a way to fuse those ideas together, but make it solely unique as well, borrowing concepts from successful properties like Pokemon, but reverse engineering certain aspects of it, which we will get into in a little bit. But somehow, some way, this totally weird concept for a show managed to come together in a way leaving a slime trail all the way to now, a whole decade after it originally premiered.
I'm gonna have to wait for a recharge to try that again.
We'll be right back to Slugterra. And now back to Slugterra.
The series opens with Will Shane, our main character's father, who is engaged in a very perilous fight with the evil Dr. Black, before being sucked into a very dark black hole created by a ghoulishly modified slug called Tempesto. At this point, we aren't completely sure what happened to Eli's father. Is he dead or is he not? But we can assume that the hole he was sucked into leads to the Dark Caverns. With his father gone, Eli receives a message from one of his slugs, Burpee, that Will manages to sling out before being swallowed by the black hole. Will's note details his job, and that the reason Eli is receiving the message is because he is gone, which everyone, including Eli, assumes meaning that he is dead. Eli doesn't seem to be too upset about this, which I guess makes sense. If my father abandoned me at a young age to play sheriff for an underground world, I too wouldn't bat an eye as much at his presumed passing. But hey, that's just me. However, to uproot my life, leave my family, friends, and the human world, and all of its yummy Brazilian steakhouse foods, to travel to a slug-themed world that I am not sure I can return from is a bit too much to ask for. Hey, to each their own, I guess. When Eli arrives in Slugterra, it's shocking how much his name is thrown around. His dad was pretty famous and known as the best slug slinger in all of Slugterra, quickly forming a reputation for himself as a peacekeeper of the realm. Eli's last name proves to attract both negative and positive attention. Many assume that he is just like his father, and are eager to duel him despite Eli having no prior slinging experience or slugs in his arsenal. He also meets friends of his father, and is able to get great equipment, as well as inherit his father's hideout, which is pretty sick by the way. I also want to add on that Shane was such a strange pick for his last name. Characters that have first names as their last names already make me uncomfortable for literally no reason, but it's just so funny how many people we meet that are like, oh, you're a Shane. And every time someone mentions his last name or his father's legacy, which happens like 4 times an episode, I just start thinking that their first name is Shane. But that's just a me thing, probably not a you thing. Anyway, after he acquaints himself with his new home, Eli, voiced by Sam Vincent, quickly meets the people that would inevitably come to make up the Shane Gang, as they're called. He first meets Pronto, who is voiced by Lee Takar. Pronto makes it known that he is incredibly useful to the young Shane as a tracker. He is always trying to prove his value to Eli, as he believes that the young Shane can eventually be as amazing as his father, and definitely likes the fame that comes by being associated with a Shane. He is a Molnoid, a digging inhabitant of Slugterra. While he's cowardly and not the best slinger, he makes up for this with his unique and very convenient digging skills. He acts as more of a comedic relief in the series, as his selfish and naive nature leads the Shane Gang into some very interesting circumstances. Eli then meets Beatrice, or as we most often hear her referred to as Trixie. Voiced by Shannon Chan Kent, Trixie is a young human girl who is incredibly gifted at slug slinging. After Will's disappearance, her home cavern was terrorized by slingers, so she decided to become her own hero and pick up the pieces that Shane left after his disappearance. Her strong sense of justice comes through in her documentary skills, as she uses her camera to both help people to understand the happenings in Slugterra and how to properly care for slugs and their environment. Her fighting skills are great too. What she doesn't have in terms of brawn and muscle, she makes up for in speed and agility. She also has great leadership skills and even proves to be more valuable than Eli on many occasions. This is shown in the first time they meet, as she is the one who saves Eli from an altercation with a bully because he has genuinely no idea how to fight in this new world. Being introduced to the concept of dueling, he is partnered up by Pronto with a cave troll named Cord Zane, voiced by Andrew Francis. Cord, expecting Eli to judge him for his species, is surprised when Eli shares that his dad taught him that cave trolls were loyal, honest, and brave. The both of them immediately establish a mutual respect and befriend each other. And Eli's dad was right. Cord is loyal, honest, and brave. He is also incredibly affectionate, big-hearted, and level-headed. His gentle and kind-hearted demeanor is balanced with his huge and bulky form that makes him the strongest physically of all of them. He also proves to be even more valuable with his immense knowledge of equipment and machinery. Both Eli and Cord are frequently shown sparring together and having a very healthy and harmless rivalry between the two of them that proves to be helpful in making sure that Eli is prepared to face the many ruthless villains of the series. Those villains include one of the first characters we ever met, Dr. Black. Black, very much a Lex Luthor-esque character who is incredibly powerful, being the owner of the influential Black Industries. This is a front for his real work, finding a way to take control of all of Slugterra by destroying the magical slug energy that protects the world. From early in his life, he was exposed to the deep caverns, changing his physical appearance to match those of the Darkbane. There, he befriended the Darkbane and discovered the Dark Water, which could be used to infect slugs, ghoulifying them. Other villains we meet include the Emperor, Spirix, the Darkslinger, and many more. The slugs that exist in Slugterra come in many different flavors. Sorry, I'm hungry and I can't stop thinking about Fogo de Chao, forms, breeds, whatever you want to call them. There are like 50-ish different breeds of slugs, and each fall into one of 12-ish different elemental categories. It gets a bit wonky when you account for the ghoulified slugs though. The different varieties of elements that the slugs could fall into are air, toxic air, earth, metal, electricity, light, psychic, fire, ice, and water. Each slug has its own unique powers, but not all of them are used for fighting. Some are even used for chores around the house. And there's even a healer slug named Doc that is incredibly rare as an energy elemental slug, but is part of Eli's arsenal. The elemental slugs are ancient slugs that are incredibly powerful, and are split into 5 main categories being earth, air, energy, water, and fire. These slugs were around way before blasters or even the humans that invented the blasters. In order to reach their velocimorph form, in which they are able to transform when hitting 100 miles per hour, they had to look to their natural surroundings to achieve these forms. The slugs we have today are their descendants. The slugs themselves are a really interesting way to approach the very interesting and conversation-fueled topic of humane animal fighting. In the world of Pokemon, that subject isn't really touched on, but there's an implication that the Pokemon have some sort of a special relationship with their owners, so much so that they will fight for them and put themselves on the line. But in real life, that's literally dogfighting, and everyone can hopefully agree that in the real world, that is messed up and downright disgusting. Luckily, in video games and cartoons, it in no way is real. Slugterra doesn't shy away from discussing this moral dilemma though. In fact, it embraces it and uses it as a way to distinguish the good guys from the bad guys. When Eli first arrives, the only slug that he has is the one that he inherited from his father, Burpee. He establishes trust with the slugs that he has, and even though slugs are used as currency and are often traded when winning a duel or purchasing new equipment, Eli sees the slug ammo as his friends that are invaluable. He also sticks up for the slugs that are underappreciated or abused by their slug slingers, extending a hand to the slugs that are left behind. When searching for new slugs as well, instead of sneaking up on them in their natural habitat and dragging them away from their home, he talks to them and asks if they want to voluntarily join his team. It is also implied that the act of velocimorphing is incredibly enjoyable for slugs, and after they actually fight each other, they don't even seem to be hurt or damaged. This could possibly be because slugs are way more durable when they velocimorph, and they don't have spines to snap or skulls to crack like humans do, which ultimately creates a nice loophole for the whole animal fighting thing. While Pronto, Trixie, and Cord initially think that Eli bonding with the slugs is unusual, through being exposed to how the bond between him and his slugs makes him a better fighter, they let that part of Eli's ethics influence how they approach the concept of slug slinging too. The Slugterra TV movies are actually not any new content separate from the series itself. Those movies being Slugterra Ghoul from Beyond, Slugterra Return of the Elementals, Slugterra Slug Fu Showdown, Slugterra Eastern Cavern, Slugterra The Emperor's Revenge, and Slugterra Into the Shadows. They were incorporated as big events or fillers that would make up part or a whole season of the show itself. After its last episode air date in 2016, the series was available for streaming on Netflix until 2018, exposing a new larger audience to the show itself, building up a nice fan base in general.
Looks like we got ourselves a standoff.
I'm ready to slug it out. And these little guys?
Now, this series nicely lives on YouTube, directly on WildBrain's Slugterra channel that boasts an impressive 1.2 million subscribers with constant uploads. While the series was airing, there were also a total of 80 Slugisodes produced and aired. These minisodes usually explored the lore and history of Slugterra more, expanding upon the universe that we get to explore in the series. The series was never officially cancelled. Instead, a lot of attention was shifted over to developing games. There were a few computer games such as Battle for Slugterra, Secret of the Shadow Mine, Slug Run, Slug Wars, and Slugterra VR. But their mobile games are what is keeping the IP feeling alive and thriving. Slugterra Dark Waters, Slugterra Guardian Force, Slugterra Slug It Out and Slug It Out 2, Slugterra Slug Life, and lastly Slugterra Slug Slinger Showdown. Those are the many games that have since been added to the App Store for download on smartphones and tablets. The quality of those games varies, with a few definitely being a bit higher in quality, but it's just cool cool to see how many different styles of games there are. Slugterra, however, 10 years after its original premiere, isn't over though. It technically is, or already has, made a comeback. Slugterra's new revival will be in the form of more shorts. Slugterra Ascension is a spin-off series that plans to be 20 4-minute shorts that follow the adventures of Eli and Trixie as they fight against twin brothers and Dr. Black affiliates Lock and Load. A sneak peek for the series premiered on September 5th, 2022 at 2:50 p.m., and new episodes began on September 18th, 2022 at 11:50 a.m. globally on WildBrain's YouTube channel and on WildBrain TV in Canada, with several episodes already out now at the time of this video. The series was pretty successful overall, winning a multitude of awards including an Emmy and a Leo Award, and a whole slew of nominations. The continuation of the series through many different formats speaks to how loved the series is across the globe. The idea for the series is derivative enough genre-wise to be familiar, but also so unique and different enough that it is interesting to watch. It leaves fans wanting more. The great plot progression helps as well, and the series is actually really good. I found myself truly enjoying what the series had to offer. From the concept to the action, it was purely just entertaining. Each episode is fun, colorful, explosive, and thrilling. The characters are likable and the plot arcs are three-dimensional enough that it is interesting to a more adult audience as well as a young one. Also, I have to give a shout out to the animation, as it was pretty difficult in 2012 to make a show that was fully CGI that looked cool enough with limited budgets, so they made good use of the environments that they were in. I love the color palette and how diverse it is, especially when we see the difference between good and evil. Slugterra versus the Dark Caverns. Like, look at Eli's hideout. I want to go there. Despite all of that though, the show of course wanted to be a vessel for toy sales, and going off the initial concept of adding guns into the show akin to Nerf guns, they did make actual blasters with plastic darts that doesn't really work too well, but I do like that they made figures for all the different slugs from the show, and if I was made of money and had room to house all of them, I'd love to collect them all. But what are your thoughts on Slugterra? Are you a fan of the show? Have you been keeping up with the new miniseries? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe with notifications on for more content like this.
Wait, remember Duck Dodgers? It was an early 2000s cartoon that plays with characters from the Looney Tunes universe, originally spawning from a short animated film from the 1950s. Clearly, with a name like Duck Dodgers, it's easy to see which Looney Tunes character we mainly focus on here as a main character for the series, Daffy Duck. Well, kind of. We're going to get into all of that in today's video. Duck Dodgers is a show that I really enjoyed growing up. When it comes to anything sci-fi or space related, you can find me front and center of the TV. Looney tuned in to see what this week in cartoony adventures had in store. A few months back from making this video, I was really excited to revisit Duck Dodgers thanks to the series being released on Blu-ray, which sparked me wanting to make this video on the subject. So if you're ready to jump into this semi-short-lived show featuring some familiar faces, let's do just that. While Duck Dodgers wasn't a show until 2003, the first ever glimpse into these galactic adventures comes from the 1953 short called Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century. Fan favorite character of the Looney Tunes, Daffy Duck, leads the series wherein that weird and wacky world of the Looney Tunes plays the role of Duck Dodgers, a space-traveling hero who faces off against threats to the universe like Marvin the Martian before he was given that proper name, along with his trusty companion, the eager young space cadet played by the lovable Porky Pig. The 7-minute short was a take on the comic character Buck Rogers and his space-related adventures in the 25th century, but thanks to how well this short was received, it carved a legacy all its own. In fact, it was so well liked that George Lucas wanted to have this short played in front of showings for the original Star Wars film in theaters, according to Mark Hamill confirming this online a few years back, as the short, directed by animation veteran Chuck Jones, is listed as the 4th greatest cartoon of all time out of a list of 50 back in 1994. So it's no wonder that eventually, this concept would be fully fleshed out in the 21st century as its own cartoon series. Heck, you can even hear it playing in the background of a scene in Steven Spielberg's classic alien film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a personal favorite of mine in the genre that explores the extraterrestrial alongside the human element. The short itself saw Duck Dodgers finding Planet X in search of a low and resource element as our duck and pig duo deal with all the slapstick and situational comedy that come from just being themselves while navigating the stars. Upon eventually finding the correct planet, they begin their ongoing shenanigans with the antagonist Marvin the Martian, getting into a battle over claiming the territory in the name of Earth or in the name of Mars. These battles against each other end with the ultimate destruction of the planet itself, as the headbutting foes continue on when all that's left is a small part of the planet that Duck Dodgers is able to claim, with a barely holding on Marvin ultimately left undefeated, giving us the knowledge that their space battles will continue on beyond this initial confrontation. The short itself is genuinely great and shows off why it worked so well back in the 50s, along with the several sequel cartoon shorts coming out in the 80s and 90s from it, showcasing why it was ripe for an eventual TV series to flesh out this concept. Luckily, the early 2000s was the right time to explore this concept once more, leading us to the full-on show simply titled Duck Dodgers.
Objects may be closer than they appear.
On paper, you can look at the base concept for a character like Daffy Duck as a secondary comic relief character, but thanks to the long history of Looney Tunes, Daffy Duck is so much more than that, even when often fitting that mold when appearing alongside the main star of it all, Bugs Bunny. We have so many examples of comic relief side characters having their own spin-off that fundamentally doesn't understand what makes them a side supporting character, versus a more grounded lead. But Daffy is pretty special in that they never fully flanderized the character like other show spin-offs may often do. While coming off most times as a lovable idiot that brings on his own on-screen comedic torture, he was still someone you wanted to root for. He's hot-headed, ego-driven, and sometimes too big for his own britches, but none of those would get in the way of still wanting to see him succeed, regardless of also wanting to see him constantly getting served up a dish of disintegration. This incredibly well-done threaded needle graduated him to have a shot at his own starring vessel with Duck Dodgers, when the show fully came to be in 2003. This all comes at a time where the old guard of cartoons were being phased out, and where new ideas would be tested left and right, and more legacy cartoon properties were given the chance to find new avenues to explore to try and stay relevant with the changing market of viewers as the generations would go on. The 2000s were a weird time. My whole channel is a big testament to that. So more experimental ideas with these legacy cartoons were happening. And I'm not just talking about the Loonatics Unleashed levels of weirdness and experimentation. Plus, that show is also genuinely good. I did a whole video on that about a year ago. This wasn't even strictly a 2000s thing. Each generation, these shows, especially ones with a legacy as rich as Looney Tunes, would try and find something that fits that generation perfectly. The 90s had the semi-babyfication of the Looney Tunes with stuff like Tiny Toon Adventures, which is now back, by the way, with Tiny Toons Looniversity, but Duck Dodgers would be a fully separate thing all on its own. And also, yes, there was a Duck Dodgers Jr. segment in Tiny Toon Adventures, and I think that's great. Or an even better example, I guess, for the continuing of the babyfication would be the Baby Looney Tunes show, that started before and ran consecutively alongside Duck Dodgers. But at this point, characters like Marvin the Martian had become a lot more used and fleshed out in the Looney Tunes world, making the character a lot more recognizable and loved as a fun villain. So going back to the drawing board when making Duck Dodgers a reality, we have main characters that are all established for an easy attachment for both an older audience and a newer, younger audience. From there, we can easily build a fun back and forth rivalry between the characters that harkens back to both the feuds of Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, as well as the extra explosive nature of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. I look back at the 2000s as this nice resurgence of sci-fi as well, where sure, there was still plenty of it beforehand, but I feel the mainstream adoption of it was taking place more and more so around then. So to pair all of this together wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. At least, why not give it a shot? The series would continue on the 24th and a half century place and time, and wouldn't be afraid to reach into their grab bag arsenal of characters from the Looney Tunes universe for cameos as other characters or creatures within the world of what essentially is a show within a show. It parodies other popular sci-fi media along with cartoons of the past to give the show a place that sits in the realm of creating its own footprint in sci-fi, while acknowledging the genre it now fits in with a level of respect and reference that only the Looney Tunes brand can do so well. Here, Daffy Duck is once again the titular character of Duck Dodgers, a character brought into the future 24th and a half century after being frozen for so long. Now being thrust into the role of a space adventure hero, Duck Dodgers has to overcome all of the challenges he faces, with the toughest sometimes just being himself. A character that struggles with being this greater hero for the sake of the greater good, but through his ignorance and ego initially. He's not the smartest, he isn't giving it his all, but somehow luck seems to be on his side, no matter how much pain he usually endures within an episode of the show. Voiced by Joe Alasky, Duck Dodgers is a character that is both relatable to many, and one that can be so different from your own set of morals that you can't help but champion his better qualities and yet root for his ego checks. Along with his trusty, eager young space cadet played by Porky Pig, voiced by Bob Bergen, these two share a fun and sometimes heartwarming partner dynamic throughout the show's run. The Space Cadet is the antithesis of Duck Dodgers in many ways. He's extremely smart and assists Dodgers in so many ways that make him look good and save the day, with him being loyal to a fault and following basically every direction or order given to him as he looks up to Dodgers as the hero Dodgers thinks himself as. So as a side character, the Space Cadet offers a nice inverse for the main character to bounce off of in more situational problems, and even so during any downtime the show offers. For an even more on-the-nose character, there is Dr. IQ High, voiced by Richard McGonagle, who is the scientist responsible for unfreezing Duck Dodgers, believing him to be this incredible hero from the 21st century that is needed to help in the future century. His character serves as the chief scientist for the Galactic Protectorate that commands Dodgers for the missions he is sent on, most times clashing with Dodgers over his attitude he has, and most times his inability to do things right. The main antagonist of the show is once again Marvin the Martian, or rather Martian Commander X2, played by Marvin the Martian, and also voiced by Joe Alasky. The commanding Martian officer is always annoyed by both his galactic rival, Duck Dodgers, causing them to always clash as they run into one another, but as well as his queen that he takes orders from for his missions as well. He is accompanied by his trusty space canine companion, K9, who is voiced by Frank Welker, who recently took over the voice role of Scooby-Doo in 2002, so that's pretty cool. In fact, Frank has voiced several dogs: Dynamite the Dog Wonder, Buttons from Animaniacs, Roger in Bobby's World, Sophie in the Chipmunk Adventure, frickin' Cujo in Cujo. The list goes on from there. While the Queen of Mars, voiced by Tia Carrera, is the overall main baddie of the show, Marvin is always first and foremost the main focus when looking at the direct conflict in the show, despite getting some other Rogues Gallery members that get in the way throughout. It's a show with a pretty simple premise. Duck Dodgers get sent on various missions throughout the galaxy, and some sort of fun, often slapstick and situational humor, as well as conflicts, all ensue. It works so well for what it is because it is so simple. The Looney Tunes in general have operated under the banner of not overcomplicating the plots and adventures, over giving us fun characters to see being played around with in their sandbox of sorts. What I personally love about the show is how it handles what the show is at its core. It always makes sure that fun is had. So while the base of it feels simple, you always get left with what feels like a fun little adventure and a bunch of laughs along the way. Aesthetically, the show made the conscious decision to bring the classic look that the sci-fi genre had in the early to mid 1900s, that being retrofuturism. A gorgeous art style that blends a vision of the future once thought and fantasized over from that time, that blends together the past and imagined future perfectly to create something so vividly realized yet unfamiliar. This was brought to life thanks to the help of artist Joel Parrott, who has a background in, and with no pun intended, background art, with something like the film The Iron Giant showcasing his incredible work of designing a fleshed out setting through background visuals, continuing to be involved in the world of Warner Brothers through films more recently like Scoob and Space Jam: A New Legacy. So say what you want about those films, but a lot still goes into fully bringing them to life that often get overlooked. For me, the characters themselves are a big reason I enjoy watching, as Daffy Duck has always been a highlight standout character from the LTU, the Looney Tunes universe, that never fails to bring a smile to my face through their consistent tropes via his attitude, or all of the visual comedic torture he's been put through and will continue to be put through. Giving him the main focus here was a lot of fun. Having Porky Pig to play off of gave the show an extra level to the characters themselves that didn't only give it slapstick to rely on. Also giving Marvin the Martian a more fleshed out role that made the character that much more lovably evil, not just being a bad guy for the sake of being a bad guy, but one who has his own personal conflict that humanizes the Martian to be more understood and in some ways more relatable to the audience, I think was just a genuinely great idea. In fact, his connection to Duck Dodgers here being looked into to help explain why Dodgers was frozen in the first place and made to look like a hero in the 21st century was a nice reveal that builds out this world of the show in a genuine way that doesn't make it feel like they're trying to tack on more of a story for the sake of it, but to show a deeper mirrored look between characters on both sides of the coin. I genuinely love what the show had to offer, from the characters and the missions that they went on, to the art direction of the backgrounds, the outfits, and all of the planets visited in the show. But with all that being said, the show ended fairly early in comparison to other shows at the time. So let's take a look into what happened to Duck Dodgers. After 3 total seasons containing 39 episodes, Duck Dodgers as a series had come to an end in 2005. Partially, we can look at the constant changing of the guard of direction for what shows worked or what shows didn't work, with constant new trials of ideas, as both Duck Dodgers and the consecutively running Baby Looney Tunes would come to an end that year, with Loonatics Unleashed starting up from there, and lasting even less time, but for a whole other myriad of reasons that I've already separately went into. The production of the show simply came to an end in 2005 as the 3rd season of the show wrapped, and while the finale to the show doesn't have a full finality to it, it does end off in a traditional way in a fake documentary about Duck Dodgers and some real and fake heroics. But as far as a concrete reason Duck Dodgers came to an end, there really isn't too much to look at aside from the show going from Cartoon Network to their sister channel Boomerang before the midpoint of the 3rd season of the show. The overall rating from episode to episode was still retaining a decent response from those who did watch, not losing any quality the show started with, but potentially viewership numbers were harder to maintain in such a space as booming as the animation space in the 2000s. Constant shows, new ideas, other networks, it was a booming time and the space was getting harder to hold attention. So along with that and the changing of the networks, it was seemingly easy to see the writing on the wall that the show may be coming to an end. But one thing we do know is that it wasn't for lack of being a well-made show that many people did enjoy. The show even had a fair share of recognition for what it brought to the table, being nominated in multiple categories during the 2004 Annie Awards for Outstanding Achievement, Production Design, Music, and Voice Acting, fully winning for its composed music done by Robert J. Kral. Continuing from there with nominations in both 2004 and 2005 by the Emmys, with Joe Alaskey winning Outstanding Performer in an Animated Program in 2005. Duck Dodgers even had multiple ties into the video game world, as there was a Super Nintendo and Game Boy game titled Daffy Duck: The Marvin Missions that came out in 1993 and 1995 for the US, that didn't fully embrace the Duck Dodgers name yet, but it's clear what it was based on. There's even a Nintendo 64 game that released in the year 2000 that does embrace the actual name, called Duck Dodgers, starring Daffy Duck. They were so close to just embracing the Duck Dodgers name, but I'll let them slide. Aside from those titles, the Nintendo Wii, PlayStation 2, and Xbox 360 game Looney Tunes Acme Arsenal, which released in 2007, featured the Duck Dodgers character, along with another nod to Duck Dodgers being in the 2014 video game Lego Batman 3 Beyond Gotham, that had the playable character of Green Lantern, the Duck Dodgers play on the Green Lantern character. So that's really cool. It's extra special that this was the final time Joe Alaskey reprised the role before he would sadly pass away in 2016. The legacy the show leaves is one that could be revisited again one day. For what it is, the show itself is 3 incredible seasons that showcases why the show earned its spot in both the realm of sci-fi and within the Looney Tunes universe. Adding on to that, the original short in 1953 stands the test of time as a piece of comedic gold with generational lasting animation that represents the era it came from so well. When it became a full show, it embraced the new era it was in without feeling like it was trying to reinvent what it needed to be. The opening theme song was done by a collaborative effort from Tom Jones and the band The Flaming Lips, blending together a sound that represents the different eras from back around the original short to the new full-on show. It's classy, funky, electrifying, and overall the perfect tone setter for the adventures to come following it playing. The show, while having many things that relate back to the other Looney Tunes characters, never felt like it had to rely on the face of the brand, never having Bugs Bunny make an appearance in the show, whether that be in a cameo role that relates to the character or something more random like just having him appear for the heck of it. While he may have been referenced a time or two, Bugs never became a crutch that the show felt that they needed to rely on to get people to tune in. Going back to how it respects and pays homage to both new and old within several fields, the show can reference something like Popeye one moment and then fully go into a Samurai Jack parody another moment. Or you can have something like The Fudd that references both the character of Elmer Fudd along with being a play on the enemies from the Halo series called The Flood. I've already mentioned that Duck Dodgers was represented in other media such as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and even slightly bringing back the character through Tiny Toon Adventures with Duck Dodgers Jr. But the character has lived on through other pieces of media as well, with some being a bit more closely attached to the brand, like in Looney Tunes Back in Action, the 2003 film with Brendan Fraser, where Daffy Duck taps into his Duck Dodgers alter ego, but even in things like Babylon 5, where in the mid-90s the sci-fi show references it as a character's second favorite thing in the universe, and even another moment where characters in that show are watching the original short. And something I love here is that at one point the Animaniacs appear in the show, in an interesting way, with the young space cadets' nephews and niece being introduced as Porco, Puerco, and Sal, who would be voiced by the 3 Animaniacs themselves, Jess Harnell, Rob Paulson, and Tress MacNeille. You can even look at the moment when Duck Dodgers performs It's Not Unusual through the voice of Tom Jones, as a fun nod to him, as well as what made the song re-famous this again with Carlton in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Duck Dodgers just likes to have fun within the medium of animation, sci-fi, and the entertainment space as a whole, and combined with all of the other reasons I have listed in this video for why I enjoy the series, makes Duck Dodgers truly a joy of a cartoon. Also, Dave Mustaine from the band Megadeth was fully in an episode, and they even performed a song that was on their album The System Has Failed, released in 2004. Why? I don't know, but it's kind of cool, and it makes me look back on all the other random celebrity and musician cameos that happen in cartoons of the past for random tie-ins. I don't know if Duck Dodger viewers were the exact audience to sell the band Megadeth to, but hey, it happened, and that's the 2000s for you. But as far as Duck Dodgers goes, the show holds a special place in my heart for how much fun I had with it as a kid growing up in the early 2000s, and now as an adult revisiting those exact feelings. I think it holds up extremely well for some cartoony fun, and has a style wholly unique to itself from other Looney Tunes related properties, making it worth the watch alone if you're already a fan of the Looney Tunes in general, but gives you plenty of reasons to fully like it on its own merits. Outside of the cartoon, Duck Dodgers, with both Dodgers himself along with Marvin the Martian, were commemorated in 2003 as their own mission patches for the first space launch squadron for the Mars Exploration Rover mission launched in that year, and that's a pretty cool legacy. Make sure to let me know in the comments your thoughts and feelings on the show. I'd love to hear your memories of it if you watched it back when it originally was on the air.
Wait, remember Loonatics Unleashed? It was the controversial, futuristic adaptation of the traditional Looney Tunes characters, but they're superheroes. Set in the year 2772, a group of superpowered individuals band together to protect the city planet of Acmetropolis. The intro to the series serves as a background to the series. A meteor hits the Earth, knocking it off its axis, resulting in the rise of 6 superheroes. Yeah, that's their origin story. That is all the explanation we get. I guess at that point they were like, here's a fun alternative idea to these characters we own the rights to. Oh, how do they get their powers, you ask? Something space related. Yeah, just say something hit Earth and they got powers. How? What do you mean how? I just told you how. A meteor hit the Earth. That's how. When you change things that people already love, there's a big chance that you'll get a lot of backlash. This was the initial sentiment from Looney Tunes fans all across the world. Really just looking at this and going, who asked? But after all the dust had settled and time had passed, is the show really as bad as some out there claim it to be? Or is it a case of a show coming out too early? That may be pretty good on a look back. Did the changes that the creators made post-criticism to the series end up saving the show? And can someone please just tell me who unleashed them all? It's like asking who let the dogs out. Did we ever get that answered? I need to know because it's haunted me for nearly 2 decades at this point. I remember enjoying the show, but could that just be a case of my young brain enjoying whatever was on the screen? Or is my nostalgia for it warranted? So I thought it'd be fun to take a look back at Loonatics Unleashed, see if the cartoon holds up and learn about how it came to be as well as what happened to it.
We had seconds, not hours, Duck.
Loonatics Unleashed was unleashed onto the world through Kids WB on September 17, 2005, and ran for 2 seasons, ending in May of 2007. Like I mentioned, we get our backstory within the opening intro to the show. A meteor crashes into the planet, causing the planet to shift its axis, as well as shooting out a supernatural energy burst that alters the genetic code of some of the people that live there, giving them superpowers essentially. Of course, this leads us to our main group of characters who serve as a superhero team to protect the planet from various other threats. This group of anthropomorphic crime fighters will be brought together by Zadavia, a pretty mysterious woman who shows up mainly in a hologram fashion and serves as the person in charge of the team, giving them their missions and overall just keeping them in line. With the team consisting of descendants of classic characters from the Looney Tunes. They live upon the skyscraper, so it's easy to draw in a lot of parallels to the Teen Titans franchise, being a teenage superhero group living in a tower with action that resembles similar situations as the Teen Titans, just with a way more futuristic twist from the powers that the group has to the endless amount of technology and gadgets at their disposal. The plan for the series was to match it to the action era of cartoons that were seemingly taking over most of the networks and capturing most kids' attention. Plus, it would be an easy entry into the toy market, right? With how often the Looney Tunes properly would adapt a form of their characters into a show that would fit in for the current times, it would make sense that this idea would have come about during this specific time.
Make it snappy, Chappie. We're about to save the city.
Loonatics Unleashed is coming right up, right here on Kids WB.
Loonatics Unleashed, every Saturday morning at 9:30 on Kids WB.
Our 6 familiar yet strikingly different main characters for the show include Ace Bunny, Lexi Bunny, Danger Duck, Tech E Coyote, Rev Runner, and Slam Tasmanian. I think it's pretty easy to tell the direct Looney Tunes character inspirations here. Ace Bunny, voiced by Charlie Schlatter, is the leader of the group who is pretty well suited for the job. He is mild-tempered and has an overall really cool and collected energy about him that is really reminiscent of the original Bugs. Also, like his great-great-grandfather, he is known for still having a great comedic side, constantly poking fun at everyone around him. His superpowers include laser vision, optical enhancement, martial arts, and agility, which is kind of a callback to Bugs' agility to be one step ahead of his enemies, being able to have fun in any situation because he's like that invincible. Lexi Bunny is the descendant of Lola Bunny. She is voiced by Jessica Daisico. They do a good job at making her character stand pretty tough on her own. She's not used as a vessel to pair up with anyone and expresses her own personality, interests, and abilities. She is a fan of fashion, video games, and music. Her powers are not only limited to super hearing, she also has chlorokinesis, the ability to control plant life, and is an incredibly skilled acrobat. Next to Ace, she is portrayed as another huge leading figure of the group and is also one of the most essential members in a fight. Danger Duck, voiced by Jason Marsden, is very close in attitude to Daffy Duck. He is always preoccupied with the fame and glory that comes with his job, but satisfyingly, for me at least, is never praised for the work that he does, and is actually often harshly critiqued or excluded by their supervisor, Zadavia. He is slimy and arrogant, but oh so lovable. His powers are probably the most powerful and the most out of pocket of the group. He has something called the Power Orb Randomizer, which is basically just the ability to create and attack an enemy with flaming energy spheres. He also has a teleportation ability, which could be a reference to Daffy Duck's ability to his spats of sporadic and fitful episodes whenever he would get particularly excited or angry. So all in all, the coolest superpowers of them all. Maybe it's a good thing that everyone humbles him so frequently. Tech E Coyote is voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who, unlike his ancestor Wile E Coyote, Tech is incredibly intelligent, actually more so than Rev Runner. His technology offers the team a lot of really cool tech and interesting inventions that makes it very achievable to fight and defeat villains of various magnitudes. His very big brain way of speaking can sometimes only be understood by Rev, which leads to their naturally strong friendship and ability to partner up in inventing things. Other than a big brain, his powers also include the ability to manipulate electricity and magnetic fields, as well as regeneration. The latter is another really cool callback to the original cartoons in which Wile's plans would literally blow up in his face, but he would be back in one piece a minute later. Rev Runner is the descendant of Roadrunner, voiced by my favorite voice actor in the business, Rob Paulson. Rev obviously has super speed, and of course, his personality has to live up to that. He talks a mile a minute and is also incredibly intelligent, which, as I mentioned earlier, is important in his relationship with Tech. Rev's additional powers include flight, possible through his super speed, enhanced strength, and global positioning, which is basically like he has GPS built right into his head. This type of psychic thinking also contributes to his ability to see briefly into the future, which he uses to avoid crashing into things. The last of the group is Slam Tasmanian, who functions as the brawn but doesn't have that much of a personality. A descendant of the Tasmanian Devil, Slam is also voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson. Well, I guess voiced really isn't the right word, so I'll just say that Richardson more provides various forms of grunting, which we aren't meant to understand. Although it doesn't sound like Slam is speaking any kind of language, the other Looney Tunes are able to understand him quite well, and often provide much needed translation for his dialogue. A lot of his interests are more so mentioned by the group, like eating a lot and eating a lot. Much like great-great-grandpa Devil, Slam can also go tornado mode. And don't just come to conclusions, even though he seems to be more bronze than brains, he shows a lot of understanding and affinity to battle strategies. Now, like we briefly talked about, Zadavia is this pretty mysterious figure who gives the Loonatics their objectives and is the puppet master of their operations, but becomes the sole reason for why the Loonatics are even here in the first place. We find out her mysterious past in relation to the meteor, with her being an alien and causing the meteor to hit the planet where it did, but only doing so as if she didn't, it would have hit the planet in a different location at a different speed that could have been cataclysmic to the whole planet, rather than just changing the axis of the planet. It's a cool revelation that adds a lot of lore to the show, explaining a bit more of the brief intro explanation that we got. However, along with her character in general, the show would make some serious changes going into its second season, from the tone of the show and the direction of the show. Now, the show would go through these changes for its second season based on a number of factors, but even before the show started, it was already causing a stir. The series was met with a lot of backlash from fans after the first look at the series was released. Fans didn't have a lot of background of what the series was meant to be, inciting a lot of panic on the behalf of fans thinking that this was going to be a reimagining of the original characters that would act as if they were replacing the original designs, voices, and attitudes. The first look promotional trailer starts with a man in Warner Brothers Studios inking a drawing of the traditional 6 characters: Bugs Bunny, Lola Bunny, Daffy Duck, Tasmanian Devil, Roadrunner, and Wile E. Coyote. After he leaves in a rush due to a news broadcast explaining that a meteor will hit Earth, knocking it off its axis, an ink jar spills, revealing a darker, different look at the characters and their new superpowers. It was not specified that these new characters were the great-great-grandchildren of the iconic characters that we all grew up with. It was supposed to be a whole new generation with just a nod to their original classic inspirations.
What's up, Doc?
But obviously, that teaser didn't lead you to interpret it that well. And I mean, when you have news reports showing the designs of the new characters to children, and they call it the evil Bugs Bunny.
What do you think, Kenny?
That's an evil Bugs Bunny, I think.
Preferring the standard look of Bugs over the new sleeker Bugs-like character, that's not the best hope for your show doing well, even if your main targeted demographic was aimed a bit older. An 11-year-old fan named Thomas created a website to petition the redesign, and it received a lot of attention. SaveOurLooneyTunes.com was an instant attention grabber, receiving over 200,000 signatures and 5,000 email responses from fans who also supported Thomas's opposition. He said his main problem with the new concept was how they looked. They didn't have any pupils and their figures became more jagged and harsh. Not to mention the line that Ace Bunny says at the end of the preview doesn't have his iconic Brooklyn accent, which I have to admit was very jarring to me. And I'm not even the biggest Bugs Bunny fan. I mean, I'm a fan, but not like a super fan. Another one of Thomas's fears was that they would put more funding into the Loonatics instead of the classic cartoons. From the network's perspective, a lot of the initial pushback just comes from the territory of trying to make something new out of the tools they already had in their tool belt. It's just part of the territory when you change something that people are comfortable with. So their intentions with making the art style and voices completely new was because they had to commit to something different enough that it wasn't jarring to viewers. The main reason for all of the backlash was because they didn't preface the intense tonal shift by clarifying it's a completely new generation. Once that was clarified, a lot of that hatred towards the new characters died out. Also, the slightly tweaked and softer character designs did help too. Honestly, I am happy that they have pupils now. They wanted to make the series more like other Warner Bros. Superhero series like Batman and Teen Titans, with its visuals and darker action-packed fight scenes. For the second season, based on both the declining viewership and feedback from parents not being into the look and tone of the show for their children, they decided to change up the formula a bit, mainly noticeable in its lighter tone for the Loonatics themselves and the problems that they deal with, filled with more jokes and less aggressive action sequences, along with the introduction of legacy character descendants making appearances, mainly as villains for the Loonatics to deal with, and some legacy characters just showing up for the heck of it. These decisions were made in hopes of bettering the show for their audience, but they initially set out to make a show for an older demographic. So now no longer having a clear vision of who you are marketing your show towards ends in both demographics not tuning in. No pun intended.
What up, Doc?
The Loonatics!
Let's get them! All new Loonatics Unleashed right now on Kids WB.
The future is wild.
Some of my critiques of the show are actually minimal, just a few nitpicky things. For one, it feels kind of lonely. There are really no other animal characters shown in the world that we explore, and it seems kind of jarring. In one of the scenes where we learn about Tech's background, we see his failed university thesis project blow up in his face, disappointing his human professor. We initially only see the outlines, really emphasizing that this is the only anthropomorphic coyote, with a human professor at a school where his peers are most likely human students. Like, I'm assuming he had to go to previous schooling before this, taking standardized tests, and just existing more in a human world, whereas initially there was a huge degree of separation between the Loonatics and the humans. It would have been really cool if they went the route that Gargoyles did by showing their interactions, both positive and negative, with humans. They do have their human-like alien overseer Zadavia, but other than that, it feels like there's so much to be explored about the Loonatics and their relationships with the world, the humans, and each other. But each episode exclusively focuses only on the task at hand. hand, which is usually the constant imminent threat of supervillains. Speaking of the supervillains, none of them are really that memorable. It's a villain of the week setup. Although in the second season we see some more versions of past Looney Tune characters like Elmer Fudd with his descendant Electro J Fudd, and Sylvester the Cat with his descendant Sylvester. Running for 2 seasons with 26 total episodes, the initial feedback was really positive. It constantly held the top spot in its second week of airing, but the success didn't last long. The series quickly went downhill with viewership, and the network admitted that it was because parents hated it. They saw it as too dark with mohawks and menacing eyes. The futuristic Looney Tunes hybrid was not a success. In fact, a New York Times article shares that the framed art from Loonatics Unleashed is hanging in the offices at Warner Bros. Animation Studios specifically to serve as a reminder of what they should not attempt to do again. Now that's kind of harsh, and kind of hurt to read because I actually had a lot of fun with the series. Sure, with the second season feeling a bit different from the first in tone, there are some definite issues with my overall enjoyment of the show, but it was great to see all of the characters working together as a big family offering similar vibes to Teen Titans. But the precedent of Loonatics Unleashed as a failure of a series with a never again attitude is just the final nail in the coffin. It seems very unlikely that we'd ever see these characters or an attempt to make something similar ever again. There are some petitions out there of fans who would love to see the series come back again, so there is still a fan base for this series who enjoyed the show for what it was. I think as people get a chance to revisit it, they will probably enjoy this fun take on a familiar property. Sure, today there is more superhero fatigue than ever before, but also I do see this show as making the right moves, but at the wrong time. Sadly, this happens more often than one would think. I love that each of the main characters have a basic color scheme. It made each of them stand out a bit more, and I just love Rev's look the most. If this show had more time to develop the style and humor of the second season onto a third season and beyond, the show could have found a rise in its audience, but it's a little too late for that, unfortunately. At least they aren't afraid to make jokes in other future shows regarding Loonatics Unleashed, taking it on the chin, with the new Looney Tunes show from 2015 making a joke about the appearance of what a modern Bugs Bunny should look like, as well as making a joke in Teen Titans Go about the reboot of the Loonatics showing a poster of the show along with a scream of terror, and even most recent in the Animaniacs reboot with most of the characters making a cameo in the series, just to be made fun of as no one knows who they are. But what do you think about the show? Have you gone back and given it a chance? Or maybe you originally watched it back then and have some thoughts on the series? Let me know below in the comments. Wait, remember Robot Boy? At the tail end of 2005, as Cartoon Network was ushering in a new era of shows as some others were coming to an end, a small in size but large in scale show by the name of Robot Boy would premiere during Cartoon Network's Sneak Peek Week. As we said goodbye to the Powerpuff Girls and the sadly short-lived Megas XLR, we said hello to a slew of new shows throughout that year, like Camp Lazlo, My Gym Partner's a Monkey, Crypto the Superdog, The Life and Times of Juniper Lee, which we will be covering soon, and oh yeah, Ben frickin' 10. But in an already packed year for new Cartoon Network content, we were treated with one last end-of-the-year potential hidden gem that would harken back to the feeling of Astro Boy, with new twists for a new age. As a fan of Astro Boy at the time, this show had my name written all over it in anticipation for it to premiere, while I myself had to wait for its official release for Cartoon Network's Saturday morning cartoon lineup in late December 2005/mid-January 2006 after the sneak peek earlier in 2005. The UK would see it first with the series premiere on November 1st, 2005. And to be fair, that's information I learned later in life. It wasn't like it was eating me up at night for weeks on end. I may be a YouTuber, but I'm not a liar. 99% of the time. Robot Boy, a show about a robot boy. I'll take the Genius Award for being a genius now. Thank you very much. This Robot Boy was created by Professor Moshimo, a well-respected scientist and part-time inventor. This here is Tommy, a 10-year-old kid who admires the work of Professor Moshimo, one day sending him a letter of anticipation for his upcoming invention. With this knowledge, and for the safety of Robot Boy being stolen and captured by his arch-nemesis, Dr. Kamikaze, he puts Robot Boy in the hands of Tommy. I'm not sure a 10-year-old is the safest option, but hey, we need a show, right? Taking place place in San Francisco, we followed Tommy's day-to-day life with his two friends, Gus and Lola, and of course, Robot Boy, as they all deal with school, teaching and training Robot Boy how to fit into society as a regular boy, and take on some bad guys for good measure as well. See, I just knew it wouldn't be any more safe for Robot Boy to be left with Tommy. Robot Boy himself is pretty cool, playing into the fish out of water trope with very little understanding of the world and his surroundings, filled with questions of how things are and why they are. It quickly turns his relationship with Tommy into one of a father figure or older brother. Between Robot Boy and Tommy, he can be activated between 3 different modes, like deactivated, where basically he acts like the toys from Toy Story when a human walks in the room. Activated, which being the standard mode, has him talking, walking, and the availability to a limited number of his abilities, like flying and being able to at least fight somewhat. But then there is super activated mode, in which things get turned to 11 when Robot Boy becomes a larger, more powerful version of himself. Slamming his hands together to activate this mode, he gains a larger arsenal of weapons, but he is no longer able to speak. So yeah, you win some, you lose some. Tommy, who lives at home with his older bully of a brother Donnie, isn't much different than most everyday, slightly nerdy but sensible kids. His friend Gus, a lot less sensible and more self-absorbed, is heavily into his gaming, whether it's a console release or a Tamagotchi ripoff. Ah, simpler times. Oh, you can still buy them now? I'll be right back.
The following Thursday.
And it's dead. His friend Lola, on the other hand, is much more outgoing and confident, bringing smarter decisions and much needed perspective for the situations the group gets into. The group's dynamic works as perfect as you think it would. It follows the formula established in countless shows before it as they play into the tropes of the main protagonist who has a complicated life, a friend that you question why they're even friends because of their personality, and a third friend who is smarter than the rest and can be a possible love interest for the main character. The biggest thing you can do to differentiate yourself from this is within the character writing, which for the most part, I think the show does pretty well for most of the group here. Gus, well, yeah, he can be a lot to handle.
Simple as that.
The show was split each episode into 2 segments like a majority of cartoons do, focusing between stories as small and as simple as Lola becoming jealous of Tommy spending more time with Robot Boy than her, to stories of Robot Boy getting his Argo capacitor knocked out of him, causing him to lose the ability to fight as a looming evil makes way. And that's what I like about this show. Even when the smaller moments happen to take the runtime of a segment, these characters in these scenarios are still interesting. But also when Robot Boy has to wreck a bunch of bad guys and defeat Dr. Kamikaze, the main antagonist of the show, it's still really entertaining. Speaking of which, he's pretty fun to see as a common reoccurrence along with his henchman and Constantine, a sumo wrestling hitman pseudo sidekick. Dr. Kamikaze himself is a small, older man, mainly to show the ages-long feud between him and Professor Moshimo. The main goal on his list of evil doing is capturing Robot Boy so that he can replicate the work of Professor Moshimo for his own army of robots. From there, the next thing on his list is world domination. Oh, same as me. So as you can see, it is pretty predictable with how these interactions between Tommy and Robot Boy versus Kamikaze, as well as the rest of the show's rogues gallery, kind of can play out. There's also people like Kurt, who at Tommy's school bullies him. So he has a bully older brother at home, a bully at school, and in his free time away from his house and school, is an evil world dominating, seeking older guy. Tommy's really going through it right now. Now, within the first minute of the show, you are treated to jokes with words like
Talking to your dolls again, wiener?
And
Topeka can poop electronically.
And you can tell 2 things from just that. 1, the jokes are flying in pretty quick within the show's writing, and 2, hopefully not every joke will revolve around just this sector of comedy. It's all subjective, but personally, I like a varying array of stylings for my comedy, especially when they are blended well. But the show would also like to keep you on your toes with new ideas and characters every now and then to spice the formula and comedy up, allowing for storylines about characters like Robot Girl, who is the same as Robot Boy, but pink, Proto Boy, Robot Boy's evil brother created years prior to him. He was stolen and corrupted by Kamikaze, which explains Professor Moshimo's overprotection of Robot Boy. Bjorn Bjornsson, who claims to be even smarter and a true genius compared to the professor, is a Swedish boy genius with an ego, and oh, he's like a kid around the same ages as the other kids as well. His goal isn't world domination, it's more worldwide recognition for having the greatest fighting robot in the world. Bjornbot. That can only happen though if he can defeat Robot Boy. The great neat mixture of villains added to the fun thread of the week that the trio and Robot Boy would have to deal with. Some encounters would feel a bit repetitive, but I never felt bored when revisiting them. It's something you can easily pick up and jump into without needing to know too much from previous segments or episodes. But as far as my main thoughts here, I had a lot of fun with the stories told, the characters were consistently fun, and you give me a show about a humanoid evil fighting robot, I'm on board, which there was a controversy about, funny enough. Aside from my comparison about Astro Boy when I started this video, Cartoon Network actually ran the 2003 version of Astro Boy a couple years before Robot Boy would premiere. Other claims of it being too similar in concept and design to Nickelodeon's My Life as a Teenage Robot did not help as well. Even Whatever Happened to Robot Jones got tossed in for the comparisons, but that's just within the animation space directly near it. Video game characters like Mega Man were called into comparison as well. Other criticisms rubbed some the wrong way with the way in which Robot Boy speaks, as well as Dr. Kamikaze's name in general, which is why in the show they kind of obscure it in different ways where it may sound like Kamikaze and not Kamikaze. But I've heard it skewed so many ways in the show that it really doesn't matter, giving the show not the best foot off the ground when it was launching. The show lasted for a total of 2 seasons with 52 episodes of adventures. Produced by Alphanim, a French production company for both France 3 and Cartoon Network Europe, as well as having support from Lux Animation and Cofanova, for the first season specifically. The show itself was created by Jan van Rysselberg, most notable at the time for X Duck X, a French animated show, and would be directed by Charlie Bean, who had worked on a slew of Cartoon Network legacy properties. Jan came up with the idea for Robot Boy from one of his children who wanted their own form of protection or bodyguard at school when they were being bullied. From there, the spark of combining action and comedy into one cartoon package intrigued Jan greatly, sparking up an idea for an entertaining show. Alphanim first picked up the series in 2002. Having already worked with Cartoon Network Europe for a co-production deal, they extended the possibilities of where the show could go beyond this: the United States. Originally, 26 episodes of a 1-season deal were ordered and to be played on the US version of Cartoon Network, quickly becoming a 52-episode, 2-season deal before the launch of the show would even take place.
I'm hungry.
The confidence behind the project was clear to see. Before we would get to the look and style of the show we know now, over the few years from the show's inception to its official premiere, it went through various design overhauls and ideals where at one point our main characters were aged down a little bit to 8 years old, and the only one with the same name would be Lola, as Eric and Chuckles replaced Tommy and Gus. Professor Moshimo was also planned to not just be a random professor and inventor that Tommy looks up to, but in fact he was designed to be Tommy's uncle. Still with a similar origin story to send Tommy Robot Boy for protection, the full production of the show took place in France, with the writing coming from the US, but still including a bunch of French writers. The UK division of Cartoon Network played a large role themselves as they pushed for the rapid production of the show, as well as Charlie Bean packed in a lot within the 11-minute individual segments, causing issues with pacing at Alphanim. Animation duties were needed to be split in order to keep on schedule with production, and thus we had Toon Boom Animation for their software, as well as Lux Animation and Digital Emation step in from their locations around the world to usher a smooth process for the rest of the production, while keeping a high quality standard. The UK would be the first to premiere the series in 2005, and Pakistan would be the last to get the premiere of the show 5 years later in 2010. Cartoon Network felt that they had something big here, so a promotional campaign was launched to start spreading the word of the show as much as possible to generate hype behind it. They made sure to hit every sector of the advertising playbook in order to do this, from digital website promotion to large display ads and of course print form media. For season 2 of the series, it did hit a few road bumps. Lux Animation and Cofanova ended their collaboration. No formal reason was ever given, so the animation studio was changed. While the show still kept a similar look, there was a different animation style slightly that could be noticed a bit. The original show writers weren't returning, which led to new talent coming in, which was for sure a tonal change, even if they tried to keep it as similar as they could. This time now having the luxury of the restrictions of freedom for said writing being loosened loosened by Cartoon Network and Alphanim to allow for some new lifeblood into the series. Now, if I may interject, as saying the show had 2 seasons may cause some confusion, here for me in the States, the show was split into 2 seasons, and thus it is listed that way for my experience. Some other variations may label the show as Series 1 and Series 2, counting Season 1's mid-season gap and Season 2's mid-season gap as a break between seasons, making it a total of 4 seasons split between 2 series. So for the sake of this video and understanding that, I wanted to elaborate. Now, new directors came on board for Robot Boy, Heath Kenny and Bob Camp, after Charlie Bean no longer had the interest to direct moving forward as he shifted to only working on storyboarding. Creative differences in the work process between the new directors caused some stir in the production, as Heath was ambitious and opted to work harder to get more done, as Bob was very stick to the status quo High School Musical style, resulting in Bob being let go from Alphanim before the production's end. Now, after the end of Season 2, Cartoon Network had felt that the property had ran its course, and it was no longer worth exploring forward for them, resulting in them pulling out of the production of the show. It wasn't just Robot Boy though, this would happen to a lot of their co-productions in 2008, as they began to transition into a batch of new shows that they were extremely interested in. Like or hate that decision, the new shows that would come from this were huge for the network. Fans of Robot Boy have been waiting to see what happened with the property. 8 years after Season 2 ended, Jan announced that currently there were no plans in exploring new episodes of Robot Boy, and production will never resume. A very concrete answer about the fate of the show, but weirder things have happened, so who knows if we'll ever see it get a second life. But as of right now, nearly 14 years after it ended, the show still is considered canceled. In 2006, Cartoon Network had some big and unique plans to bring more attention to their show with Robot Boy and the Island of Doom, a pseudo-interactive way to get involved with the show, as over the course of a work week, viewers could call in and speak to Gus and figure out how to help him rescue Tommy and Lola, who were captured and held hostage by Dr. Kamikaze. You could also play as Robot Boy in a game where you would avoid icebergs, as well as an Escape the Maze game. All of this would come with an incentive to win prizes. Oh yeah, and rescue Tommy and Lola, I guess. When it comes to the show broadening its franchise, we really didn't see much come from the property. With the show being able to be watched in HD on YouTube, the only physical release versions of the show were a few DVD volumes, exclusively for France. There were also a few random things throughout different regions around the world. A supposed comic book may be out there, as well as an action figure that is pretty freaking cool. But a big thing that we would see in the mid to late 2000s era were website flash-based video games for various network properties. Robot Boy had 2 main games: Depth Charger, where you would dodge and navigate obstacles while taking out sea mines, and Tommy Takeaway, where you dodge attacks, attack back, and ultimately rescue Tommy. This game having the same concept as the Island of Doom game. There was also this unfinished, long-lost Robot Boy game, Robot Rescue. It's visibly unfinished from seeing undefined plastered in place of lives, health, and points. It was a mixture of both of the previous games somewhat, as it tried to look a bit more technically advanced. There were also a few other games like Professor Moshimo's Robot Testing Lab used for promotional use in 2008, with a task of giving out commands and testing robots for the professor, as well as 4 games created specifically for Sky Television's no longer existent Sky Games. A special edition promotional CD-ROM released in 2005 in the UK and 2006 in Spain that contained character information, some wallpapers, a handful of video clips from the show itself, and the Tommy Takeaway video game that would later make its way to Cartoon Network's website. So not a ton of stuff outside of the show, but some pretty interesting stuff nonetheless. While Robot Boy may not have been a perfect show, well, which show ever is, it provided a few seasons of fun with great character relationship dynamics, mainly between Tommy and Robot Boy. Harkening back to the vibes of Astro Boy truly helped bringing me in and immediately finding a sense of attachment. Cartoon Network, whether you like the majority of their shows or not, I do commend them for taking more risks compared to other networks and giving creators a chance to get their vision seen, as well as build hype around them with stuff like Sneak Peek Week and all the various ways they promoted this show.
I'll see you soon, okay?
If you missed this show when it originally aired, or you just never knew about it, I'd highly recommend giving it a shot, as I enjoyed my return to watching it. Or maybe I just really like robots. If you've seen Robot Boy, please let me know your thoughts on the show in the comments.
Regular show is anything but. A shocking statement to start off, I know. But one of the biggest appeals to the show is how it starts off like an average day that quickly can turn into a multitude of unexplainably weird adventures, from grounded street-level journeys to universal expanding voyages. The final
season of regular show itself encompasses the weirdness by taking the story completely into space, and having a through-line narrative between pretty much every episode rather than these standalone wacky episodes. Regular show remains one of the shows that will completely go left when it's heading right. The mundane to madness workplace buddy comedy always filled its 11-minute segment runtimes with entertaining nonsense that played on the edge of a kid's show and something slightly more adult, in which is a direction the creator would venture off to after regular show would come to an end. But today, let's take a look at how this seemingly innocent show ended its 8-season run with a funny, yet emotional episode that would blow the minds of fans and cement itself as one of the most interesting and best endings to a show out there. This is the shockingly weird way regular show ended.
We don't care. Makes sense to me.
J.G. Quintel has had one of the most exciting runs for Cartoon Network on a variety of shows to then creating some of his own. From attending Cal Arts with Thorpe Van Orman, the creative behind The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, and Pendleton Ward, who took the world by storm with Adventure Time. Initially working on Star Wars Clone Wars as an apprentice, no, not that type of apprentice, the type of apprentice that revises storyboards, to then working on Camp Lazlo as well as the creative director for Flapjack before he would be invited to Cartoon Network's Cartoonstitute, there has to be a better name for that, to pitch and show off creative ideas that could have a chance at going beyond just a short. Having had some characters created for his student films, he inevitably came up with a visual pitch instead of a verbal pitch, as the idea of regular show is for sure a harder concept to explain rather than just show what it was. Both Craig McCracken and Rob Renzetti were pretty on board with what JG had to show, and the project was greenlit. At the same time, he would work with Ward on Adventure Time, keeping his schedule pretty full at Cartoon Network. From 2010 to 2017, regular show would span 8 seasons for a total of 261 individual segments, and even a movie in 2015. To say that regular show made quite the impact on the network would be a massive understatement. Along with the 1-2 punch of Adventure Time running simultaneously, this would be a part of the new age Cartoon Network is still currently in. You could make a million videos talking about almost any episode from the show to speak about how fun, weird, and downright interesting the show consistently was. But season 8 in general completely diverts from its usual to deliver something special. The first episode of season 8, One Space Day at a Time, sets in motion an overarching story that takes our lovable slackers and company into the stars and that culminates in an ending only regular show could produce. Starting off with a domed over park being sent into space. A plot point from the previous season where the dome was part of an experiment, and during the season 7 finale, after Rigby graduates, they somehow get sent into orbit after hitting a button with secret motives from Mr. Maillard, the owner of the park. So to end season 7 on such a massive cliffhanger and to have drip-fed this space mystery a bit before we even get to season 8 was a sneaky and cool way to prepare us for something rather different. Later on throughout their space ventures, we arrive at a space VHS store that claims Pops is the chosen one, where a special VHS that contains the past and origins of Pops. It explains how Mr. Maillard found him as a baby with a scroll about 2 brothers, one of good and one of evil, who were destined to fight one another. Pops has been experiencing some changes in powers, and for good reason. He needs to train to master his abilities and prepare to fight against his evil counterpart. After Pops takes on intense training to hone his powers and skills, he wants nothing more than to not face off against Anti-Pops, which is just Pops, but he's evil. Through meditation, he's able to contact Anti-Pops right inside his head, as we see how Pops tries to reason with Anti-Pops, where then he is tricked into believing that there is a way to settle this battle without a fight, as he thinks that there is still good inside of Anti-Pops. When they confront each other, Pops tries to extend a hug of peace. Foreshadowing? Maybe. But that didn't work and a fight breaks out. But this battle shows off their powers against each other in action, with Pops finding Anti-Pops' erasing powers to be overpowering, as the rest of the park's crew has to swoop in to rescue him, and Pops' trainer giving his life to save them as they escape. Now, with the battle coming up, they must travel to his home world of Lollyland to fulfill the destiny of battling Anti-Pops, in which Pops still struggles with this conflict. He's terrified on both ends of not being able to save save the universe, and of course, being in this fight in general. This whole build-up throughout Season 8 felt like a celebration of explaining the method of the madness we've seen for the seasons before, as it pays tribute to the character of Pops and his journey of just being this happy-go-lucky fella to the sole defense against the destruction and reset of everything. There's a touching episode before the end where everyone spends time cheering up Pops and making sure he knows that they have his back no matter what. To commemorate their life and times together, they save their memories as individual moments to be put on a Blu-ray box set, which in real life does not exist, and I'm not happy about that fact. I know it's all on streaming, but it's not the same. I'll fight for physical over streaming any day. Wait, is that foreshadowing?
Be right back, everyone.
Coming up next, regular show.
Let's get into the finale of the show, starting off with Pops having nightmares about himself losing the battle and being scared to fight Anti-Pops. Now as they arrive at his home planet of Lollyland, the Guardian statue explains about this exact battle happening every 14 billion years as a part of a universe resetting cycle. We get a further deep dive into the history of Pops, how him and his planetary race of people came to be, seeing that when the perfect ultimate creation in Pops was created, there needed to be a balance, thus giving birth to Anti-Pops. Every cycle, this has all happened before. The same people in the same places, ending in the same result. A draw. No one wins, as when the fists collide, the impact causes the universe to reset once more, and so on the cycle goes. This time has to be different though, so the rest of the crew try to strategize setting up traps to catch Anti-Pops off guard once the battle starts. But Pops is hesitant due to his good nature, but allows them to all go through with setting them up. Once Anti-Pops arrives, Pops offers another chance to reason with him for peace, but it doesn't work, which springs the traps into action. But all of those efforts fall flat as Anti-Pops is completely fine and more ready to fight than ever. A deal is made for the duel, however. The first to knock over the other settles the fate of the universe, as when they rip off their shirts, they're both ripped. From martial arts to then their abilities, Pops actually gets the upper hand. Knocking over Anti-Pops and the battle ends in Pop's favor, is what should have been. But Anti-Pops breaks the deal and continues the fight. The henchmen begin to enter the fight as they go after the rest of the park's crew, but once the literal embodiment of streaming shows up to aid on the side of Anti-Pops, I enter the fight because I said I'll fight streaming. Okay, well, you know, that of course that didn't happen. But physical media does, as HD, DVD, and Blu-ray show up to the fight, along with a plethora of cameos from characters throughout the show's run show up for one more intense and over-the-top battle. It pulls off the same feeling as Avengers Endgame, 2 years before that movie even happened. I sense some regular show fans on the writing team over at Marvel. Jokes aside, as Pops handles Anti-Pops and Mordecai along with Rigby fight off the henchmen in aerial combat, the rest of the crew and the backup combine forces to turn into a giant mech to fight streaming, with HD, DVD, and Blu-ray ultimately landing the crushing blow with their superior sound quality compared to streaming. And that just makes me feel so justified in why I love physical media. Thank you, regular show. Anti-Pops, however, has grown more and more powerful, growing in size and starts to erase everything in sight. But once he fully erases Muscle Man and High Five Ghost, Pops can no longer hold back in his ultimate power, growing massive to match Anti-Pops. The battle becomes more intense and the big colliding punch seems to be happening. So in a last-second effort, Mordecai and Rigby fly directly in between the punch, and in a flash that seems to reset the universe, we find ourselves back in the original episode of the show, The Power. Yeah, it just cuts to the original first episode of the show. I'm sure someone watching this live had to be totally confused and thought something happened and Cartoon Network messed up their broadcast. But this confusion would be short-lived, as Rigby quickly remembers every journey and adventure they've ever been on up until the final battle. He tries to explain this to Mordecai, but it doesn't hit him until they dig up that Blu-ray set that was just made for them, and it works. But what doesn't work is the fact that we still don't have this Blu-ray. They then realize that they aren't back in time, they are frozen in time in this pseudo-pocket dimension, so they use the power of the keyboard to fling them back to the battle still raging on. During this, Pops gets knocked back into his own past as the original J.G. Quintel short of the naive man from Lollyland. Stuff like this specifically is what I love. To see these little inside jokes and moments and the creators getting to go full-on bonkers with their vision, offering a visual treat not only for the audience but for the fans. Furthering this into the whole fabric of the show unraveling, with the characters turning into production notes and storyboards. It has been something I feel we have seen more and more recently, and even in Quintel's newest show, Close Enough, with the daughter character somehow breaking into Cartoon Network's offices to see the production of the show being made. But it just doesn't get old. It's truly a fun little meta spectacle that adds a layer of appreciation to the creative process. Now, as the fight is looking grim, Pops wants to go in for a different approach, one that was foreshadowed several episodes back, and now trying to settle the score with kindness. Rather than fight, Pops goes in for a hug to help balance out Anti-Pops' evil heart as they barrel towards a sun. And in these final moments, Anti-Pops loses the struggle of evil and finally accepts the love into his heart as they both crash into the sun. Pops sacrifices himself, a selfless act that would not only end the battle and save the universe, but stop this cycle from continuing further. We then cut back to Earth as the dome returns with everyone back home cheering on their arrival. We see as everyone celebrates this that life goes on. A statue for Pops is put up and the park crew gets older. They are now able to live their lives, start families, and all with no threat of this great reset. All that is missing is Pops. A main character in this seemingly day-to-day nothingness show gave up their life to save everyone from certain doom. It's beautiful and touching how well done this is. 25 years after, we meet with Mordecai and Rigby once more. They reminisce on their lives and how they got to the spot in life that they're at, all while we pull back and see that this was all being watched from a VHS titled Regular Show, from Pops himself in the afterlife, as he says,
"Jolly good show."
And the sounds of David Bowie's Heroes plays as we end this seemingly regular show. And if that didn't hit you right in the feels, that moment right there, then I don't know what will.
How hard did you hit your head?
Yeah.
Huh?
In the end, this finale, nay, the whole season, is such a weird diversion from the original setup of the show, but it feels so much more impactful that it did something so different. It left the series at a truly memorable moment. Each episode has a connective tissue leading the adventure with a constant beat-by-beat story that takes the wacky nothingness journeys and fuses it together with a mystery thriller that leads to a satisfying, emotionally driven ending. It's something so unexpected from this show that you almost feel like you should have expected it. The charm of the show about the day-to-day life at the park is still there. They found a great way to still incorporate those feelings within the park being their spaceship, essentially, with this allowing for intergalactic adventures with some silly non-consequential side quests to story-driven plot points that build towards the gravitas of the ending. It's not only a good ending, it's a great ending. Easily one of the best out there in modern times that I can recall. The whole ending sequence of time passing, the rest of the crew's life going by as their futures are all being watched on a VHS tape by Pops in the afterlife, it's beautiful. The show, especially in the last season, didn't shy away from death, most times at the expense of a gag or joke, but to kill off a main character hits a lot harder, and for the sacrifice made especially. It was for a purpose, for the universe to be safe, for his friends to be safe. While the show had connecting stories before, plot points that would flow through multiple episodes, and character traits that don't just disappear when the episode ends, it was nothing like how this final season handled this larger and well-told narrative. To me, this intimate slice of the park life really connected the relationships of all these characters further. It was all unexpected and well executed. But those are just my opinions. How do you feel about the ending of Regular Show? Did it have the same impact on you it was intending to go for, or was Season 8's changes in structure a distraction? Let me know in the comments.
I can't believe personally I let a show that ticks off so many box
boxes for me pass by for this long. If you have not heard about or seen anything about this show, hopefully this video gives you that look into it to spark some interest. A goal of mine throughout this year is to go to a lot of shows that are considered more recent or even still running, like Craig of the Creek, and give them a shot. Essentially stay up to date sometimes and appreciate where this medium of storytelling is at currently. Craig of the Creek has been on Cartoon Network for the past handful of years, with 4 seasons under its belt and renewed for a 5th season coming later this year. So let's take a look at why this show has just captured my attention and just maybe why it should capture yours. And totally not because I was bullied into it.
Cute story and all, but who cares?
Alright, have a good one!
So why did this show specifically jump out to me over anything else at the moment to take a look at first? Well, a couple of reasons. First, being the look of the show itself and understanding what this show is about. The show follows Craig Williams, a kid living his day-to-day life hanging out with his friends in a fictionalized suburban Maryland-based town called Hercleton. A lot of my favorite cartoons growing up, and a lot from Cartoon Network, pull a lot from personal memories that I can relate to. It's something we've discussed a lot here on the channel. But whether a little or a lot, just an ounce of something familiar can attach me pretty heavily. For me, the biggest thing is that for 90% of my life, I've lived in Maryland. From my childhood to my adulthood, Maryland has been home for me. And while the show has a lot of its inspiration from the DC metro area in Baltimore, it definitely focuses on the suburban areas in between. I live close enough and have visited these specific areas frequently in my life that a sense of familiarity kicked in. Literally immediately. The next major thing really relates to what the show is about, and that is the imaginative wonder Craig, Kelsey, and JP have for their adventures in their local creek hangout spot, where in which they play into a fantasy-esque kingdom, where all of the kids that would hang out at the creek essentially would be part of different tribes of friend groups, with tree forts and all. Your typical episode of the show would follow our main 3, known together as the Stump Kids, as they embark on adventures within the creek to either become legends of the creek, like so many others have with their own legendary stories, or all-around fun games that you'd play as a kid, as well as plenty of other fun tales personal or incorporating everyone. These adventures would also parody tropes from all sorts of media that play well against the playful imagination one would have growing up. Whatever the setup for the episode would be, it kept the spirit of these vital moments in childlike wonder alive. Growing up in Maryland, myself and other friends in the neighborhood around the ages of 8 to 11 years old, much like the characters in the show, had an area near the neighborhood that was a secluded little forest that had a creek running through it. It served as a path to kind of help you find your way in and out. And towards the middle of the woods, where a handful of trees would be knocked down from storms and some semblance of others who put things up, was stuff like a tire swing or even a lookout post that was something like 10 feet high. And as a kid, 10 feet is high, okay? And the show really made me remember a lot of this. While the adventures or whatever we got up to would be obviously different from the show, it brought me back to a time where my only worry was if my friends could hang out that day. At this point in my life as an adult, I'm really starting to fondly recall and reminisce on those days. And this show almost feels like a vessel to relive those good times. Heck, a lot of, if not all of, this channel is dedicated to all the things from past to present in animation that have meant a lot to me, and sometimes exploring how they affected me when they originally came out. Oddly enough, the show gave me this mixed feeling of Hey Arnold, my favorite show of all time, and the Rugrats, fusing the real-life, everyday feel of people you know like Hey Arnold with these imaginative adventures that harken the feelings of the adventures the Rugrats went on. The kids themselves in the show have their own distinct personalities, from the direct main trio to all of the extended tribes of kids shown in the show. Heck, I can even feel a Codename Kids Next Door vibe to an extent. It really plays into the role-playing aspect in a Dungeons & Dragons way, where the kids have their own roles to play within their tribes at the creek, from a place to purchase or rather trade various things for items needed on adventures, to even different tribes handing out quests for our main trio to go on. Even Craig in his home life can view things as missions or obstacles to overcome. Like, for example, him trying to get out of a family dinner to go out and play with his friends. He would pretend that he's scanning the room and trying to figure out how to navigate everything thrown in his way. It's all very unique and something that made me fall more in love with the show itself. So let's look further into these characters that help make the show so special.
Narrating seems a lot more dramatic today.
Next, it's Craig of the Creek.
Craig himself is the leader of the main three in the show, focusing on the exploration of the creek itself and cataloging the setting by mapping out the creek. Similar to my comparisons of Hey Arnold and the Rugrats, he carries a lot of the mentality that Arnold and Tommy had, which is empathy and compassion for others, often helping others out. His full getup consists of his trusty satchel and his staff, which he made himself. He is voiced by Philip Solomon. Kelsey, voiced by Noelle Wells, is more of the warrior of the group, being more of the let me handle this type as she sees herself as the hero of the story. Included in this is her own internal hero-esque monologue and of course her trusty sword. It's made of PVC though, so she's not going all berserk on all the others. She also has a pet bird, which she calls a falcon even though it clearly isn't. Its name is Mortimer, and I love this little bird. JP is the comic relief of the group, often being not the smartest of the three, but a kind kid who loves to go on these adventures with his friends and use his imagination. He has an oversized jersey that he wears and it gets dirty quite often. He is voiced by H. Michael Croner. Surrounding our main characters is both an assortment of interesting, varying in age kids who inhabit the creek and mainly Craig's family. From his younger sister who likes to act older than she is and is very particular in how neatly she keeps her life, voiced by Lucia Cunningham, to his older brother played by Phil Lamar, who is the smart know-it-all type mostly spending his time on screen with his brother, demeaning his childlike wonder and intelligence. His father, played by Terry Crews, is a caring family man who, much like Terry Crews, has a focus on fitness. And of course his mom, played by Kimberly Gregory. She is caring and she is able to really understand her children and break down the necessary walls to properly communicate with them, in most cases giving advice and perspective that my own mother has given to me. It's a sweet and realistic family dynamic that the show layers on extra and is greatly appreciated. The other kids of the creek bring memories of kids that I grew up with or just knew in general, like the elder kids of the creek who are a bit nerdier and represent people I've played World of Warcraft with and other games when I was back in high school.
Is that an Evangelion reference?
The sewer tribe is pretty cool. In my neighborhood in my early teen years, there was a large sewer system that had like 2 or 3 major walk-in openings, and of course, as kids do, we explored them plenty, so I thought this aspect of the show when brought up was pretty cool. The alliance of science kids, the tea timers, the list of cool and different groups of kids fleshes out and freshens up each journey that we go on. There's a nice level of time crafted into most every character, diving into who they are, their backgrounds, and their interests. Even adding in Omar as an honorary 4th member to the Stump Kids later on, where his whole backstory and characteristics are defined pretty well and in some cool ways. Coming from Matt Burnett and Ben Levin, who had previously worked together on multiple projects, with the most notable being both of them working as writers on Steven Universe, another show I am keen to cover here on the channel at some point. One thing that I always love to see, especially throughout the history of Cartoon Network, are people who you can trace back to working on other shows, getting the chance to create their own show or work on other shows in new positions. For example, the first one I can think of on the spot is J.G. Quintel. On just Cartoon Network alone, he went from writing on Camp Lazlo to story writing on The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack to creating Regular Show, and now another show that's under Cartoon Network Studios, but for an older audience on HBO Max, close enough. And in between all this, he's doing voice work and other writing for other shows, but he had the time to define his voice within his writing and was able to create works of his own that are now loved. So with Craig of the Creek, this is an incredible outing from both Matt and Ben, who I think, with this show and beyond for what they do next, have my attention. I am excited based on what I've seen and enjoyed. I'm very much of the mindset where aside from just appreciating the art, I appreciate the artists and want to see what they create next and look back on what they've already created. That's how I've discovered some of my favorite film directors, some of my favorite manga writers and artists, and of course, musicians.
Well, that's my story. Guess I better get going.
Coming up next, it's Craig of the Creek.
Speaking of musicians, the rapper Del the Funky Homo Sapien, if you aren't familiar with rap music, he was a part of the Gorillaz song Clint Eastwood and Rock the House, as well as his own great lineage of work, made an appearance in the show in the episode The Kid from 3030, and makes a later appearance in the series to perform a song during Season 3's finale. Del actually seems to have found some fun in the voice acting world, as he also would go on to make an appearance in Nickelodeon's Middlemost Post. Cartoon Network specifically has worked with plenty of artists and rappers for their cartoons over the past decade, and I've always loved that. And plus, there's lots of ska music in this show, like, that's an instant 10 points. Now, like I was saying earlier, why I truly found a connection with the show is how it portrays both childlike wonder and how it finds ways that anyone can find themselves in. Aside from the incredible nostalgic-like references and homage, the show feels like home. Yeah, home. The Maryland setting personally solidifies that for me, but it's also everything else that the show encompasses. Even looking into the suburban neighborhoods outside of the adventures shows a setting that again is so familiar to me, and something I feel I haven't seen represented in a cartoon before, or at least something that I can't immediately recall. Stuff like townhouses being shown and being something that I grew up in at one point, capturing exactly what my own experience was as a kid. I know others have to appreciate stuff like this as well, because I certainly appreciate details like this. In fact, the show is full of moments big and small that I think everyone can find themselves in and appreciate, being able to resonate with so many things, moments, and characters. As much as I stay in the past and reminisce on so many of my childhood shows that made me, it is really refreshing and eye-opening that I do need to give newer shows like this more of a chance, thinking that I've outgrown the new stuff out there when that could not be further from the truth. And that's why I love the animation medium. It can speak to all ages, from the stories being told to the depths of jokes, situations, and characters. Craig of the Creek is now something that has opened a new door for me personally, and it's something that I hope to bring more of on the channel going forward. So I already owe a lot to this show, and my time with it has been more than well worth it. There's even an episode about Craig and his father playing video games together.
Is that an OKKO reference?
And their rivalry about their son surpassing him in a game really harkens back to playing games with my dad. I remember personally playing this kickboxing game on the PlayStation 1 and how we'd go back and forth for hours every week kicking each other's butts. This show really pulled those feelings back out to the forefront of my mind. Now, since we're on the topic of video games, while there are some Cartoon Network website games for this show, based on the nature of the show, I think a full-on RPG in the style of the South Park RPG games would actually be pretty awesome. I know that's a crazy, unrealistic ask from me, but I'm just saying, I'd buy the heck out of that. A show like Craig of the Creek hits me as an adult with nostalgia to a certain time in my life, but to those growing up with the show right now, it may be affecting them in many different ways. And to just know that there is that duality, multiple ways that a piece of media can both relate to and be interpreted differently, is both beautiful and brilliant. In the span of a month, I went from only knowing the show by name to completely being entranced in what it has to offer. I am very excited for season 5 of the show and wish it nothing but the best going forward for a nice and long run on Cartoon Network. As we grow up and days hanging out with your friends seem like a distant place in time, it's nice to take a second to cherish those moments through the mediums that take you back to them.
Is this whole episode a Pokemon reference? I love this show.
If you never gave the show a chance or heard much about it, I'd highly recommend it. I knew I was in for something interesting, but I didn't know that I would end up finding more than a show that I absolutely love, but also see myself in so greatly. If you have seen Craig of the Creek, please let me know your thoughts on the show in the comments.
Adventure Time is a fantasy-fueled animated Cartoon Network series that follows Finn and Jake as they adventure around, kicking butt and saving lives. The series is not only a modern-day classic and held in very high regard by many, but it also managed to impressively capture the hearts of a diverse audience of all ages with its clever humor and poignant creativity. Through its monumental 10-season run, the series managed to transcend the television screen of young kids and formed a whole generation of artists and viewers alike in books, games, and online culture. If you enjoy the video, you better subscribe. Stick with me as we go on the quest of a lifetime exploring the conception, themes, and world building of Adventure Time, as well as discover why it was such a revolutionary cultural phenomenon in its time, with a lasting impact that is still felt to this day.
You guys are up to something!
The series is essentially just two guys being dudes. Just two guys being dudes in a fantasy world, that is. Starring Finn the human and his best friend and bro for life, Jake the dog. The two must navigate a strange, warped world in the near future after the fallout of the Great Mushroom War. Magic has returned to the land, and Finn, commonly referred to as Finn the human, is voiced by Jeremy Shada, and is characterized as the ideal heroic protagonist. He's characterized as a fiery kid who has a strong desire to help people by doing the right thing. king. His iconic look consists of his two-eared white hat, blue outfit, and green backpack, and of course his flowing blonde locks that we get to experience on rare occasions. He also isn't complete without a sword in his hand. While like I said, he's a righteous hero, he's also just a boy. His character shows off a broad range of traits. He can be short-tempered and impulsive. He also craves a sense of security and normalcy within a twisted-up mutant world. And no character is unmarred throughout the course of the 10 seasons of adventuring. His character is knocked down and wronged in so many ways, but he doesn't let it change his character. He just lets things grow with him as he matures. Jake is Finn's older adoptive brother, who is also the other main character in the series. Voiced by John DiMaggio, Jake sounds and acts a bit more mature than Finn, but I use the word mature very lightly, as he really is just a goofball sometimes. He hits a broad range of character traits, sometimes proving to be incredibly wise and protective to nonsensical and sometimes self-centered. He's basically the stereotypical chaotic older mentor figure that is prone to crime on some occasions, you know, the typical stuff, right? But he also cares for Finn an incredible amount and proves to be unconditionally loyal to him. Oh yeah, and he has the magical ability to shapeshift into anything. I can't believe I didn't mention that first, but now I am. Jake's magical abilities come in handy on a multitude of occasions. Both Jake and Finn have made heroing their occupations, so they actively go out and seek adventures in the majority of these episodes. Jake's shapeshifting becomes a really nice safety net considering how Finn, especially in the start of the series, can be pretty fragile. The two of them live in their tree fort, which is basically just the coolest tree house that you could ever imagine. When they adventure away from home, they usually spend their time with other characters like Princess Bubblegum, the Ice King, Marceline the Vampire Queen, Lumpy Space Princess, Tree Trunks, Earl of Lemongrab, BMO, and a whole world of other unique magical characters.
What the what?
Created by Pendleton Ward, Adventure Time started out as a hit online animated short and over the course of a decade has developed into a Cartoon Network cult classic that everyone recognizes. The origin of the series can be traced all the way back to Ward's years at university at Cal Arts, specifically at a final film screening called the Cal Arts Producers Show. In the audience, enjoying the final products of the graduating animation students, was Eric Human, producer for Frederator Studios. He decided to approach Ward after the show for a few reasons, the main one being he just truly enjoyed his work. He said that every time he saw one of his works, he never wanted it to end. So he invited Penn Ward to pitch some cartoon ideas for Frederator for their shorts anthology series titled Random Cartoons. These would later air on Nickelodeon and be an incredible way to seek out fresh new ideas for potential series. Ward showed up to the pitch with his guitar, and instead of presenting a storyboard or just talking through his idea, he sang what we now recognize as the Adventure Time intro song. And traditionally, bringing a musical instrument to a professional series pitch usually would be a red flag for the studio, but the pitch went well and everyone enjoyed his ideas. It took a bit of convincing for Fred of Frederator to commit to Ward's artsy idea, but when he did, Ward entered production full swing, doing a lot of the heavy lifting himself, in terms of animation and voice acting. But he completed the 7-minute short on April 24th, 2006. A few months later, it was nominated for an Annie Award, but they had a bit of a problem when it came to screening the short. It hadn't, and due to the production guidelines, couldn't air online yet, but it needed to be accessible to the Annie voters, so they pulled a sneak 100 and aired it under the radar on Nick's sister outlet, Nicktoons, in the early morning hours of January 2007. Shortly after, Frederator posted the short to Google Video and later held a screening for all of the shorts in the Random Cartoons program. Seemingly overnight, it gained tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of views. It was an instant online success, developing a very dedicated cult fan base over the course of just a few days. Despite the extremely tangible representation of its success in view counts and reviews, Nick decided to pass on Adventure Time for some reason, something I know they'll regret after seeing its empire grow in the years that followed. But even though Nick turned it down, Frederator and Ward shook it off and took their idea elsewhere, specifically to where Ward had been working at the time on the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, Cartoon Network. Fred Seibert approached Rob Scorcher, the chief content officer, with the idea. Scorcher at the time felt the series was something that was unique unique and indie, something that felt comic booky, with a completely new tone. Although it did feel unpolished, they picked up the series, and at the time, it was technically a big risk because the idea was not fully realized. But in pulling his trust in Frederator and this unique story, he took on one of their most successful shows ever. In creating series, there were a lot of influences for Ward, some more traditional ones being Dungeons and Dragons, video games like A Boy and His Blob, and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker arcade game. But in creating the art style, Ward is incredibly vocal about how influential his peers and coworkers were, trying to infuse his art with a lot of little traits here and there from a lot of his coworkers on previous shows. Additionally, in making important decisions like the voice actors, Ward turned to his mother's preferences when choosing what he wanted his show to sound like. His mother, who was not a fan of cartoons and specifically was tired of listening to cartoon voices most characters had, Ward wanted his characters to have a natural tone to them, and not have characters that are just plain annoying just to have an annoying character. He wanted every one of his characters to have a solid range of emotions, exhibiting a more real feel to their personalities. Artistically, when designing the consistent look of the series for his characters, Ward turned to his own tastes and preferences. He says he just likes cute looking stuff, so simple and minimal features were most appealing. The concept of not having noses or anything else on their face to detract from expression was also important. He wanted to reference the classic smiley face's iconic representation of emotion in its simplest form. Another plus side to this is that kids could very easily draw these characters too, which was additionally important to Ward. The flexibility of simple design made it so that not only could viewers and kids simply draw the characters, but even the storyboard artists on the series would have a much easier time with artistic consistency in the series. The first official episode of Adventure Time premiered on Cartoon Network on April 5th, 2010, and faced astounding immediate success ratings-wise. The short pilot on Nicktoons was a fantastic preface and predictor to how the series would be received once realized. From there, the series ran for a staggering 283 episodes in 10 seasons, with one bonus episode special, series of shorts, and an additional miniseries on top of that. It also boasts an impressive number of impact to the gaming world, with several video games, online Cartoon Network games, and so many other types of games released as well. Even a few crossovers or parodies were attempted in stuff like Futurama, The Simpsons, and for some reason Deadpool. He owns a watch with both Finn and Jake on it. I guess that speaks to how diverse their audience is, but if you really think about it, Deadpool would love this show. The reason for its success could pretty simply be attributed to the times. The rapidly growing structure of online fandom was undeniable, especially during the time that Adventure Time had originally premiered its short. Once it captured the attention of those online, it spread like wildfire and drove people of all ages to watch it on Cartoon Network. The humor of the time too was also incredibly important. The style of humor was random XD. I'm having graphic flashbacks just thinking about it. But Adventure Time manages to capture that sense of humor in an indirect way and really took the reins. The incredibly bizarre setting gave the artist and crew infinite resources for expressing various themes. They had so much artistic freedom in terms of style and plot devices to really do anything that they wanted, and also offered continuing plots for Finn and Jake to drag the viewer along with them. The team really experimented, and due to its shorter format, they got to try out new tones and explore new places without too much on the line. They would constantly have guest animators come on and make these really surreal looking episodes with new art styles, and honestly, they're some of the coolest episodes of the entire series, getting to really do whatever they wanted. While the series is funny and random XD to a decent extent, it also gives the viewer space to breathe and experience different ranges of emotions. From the beginning of his formative years, Ward loved video games where he could stop on one screen and just sit looking at the art, taking everything in, noticing new details as he would do that. He notices that when you're watching cartoons, not a lot of shows give you the gift of slowing down. The series also allows deeper themes to be explored, like the complexities of parent-child relationships, the difficulty of change, and even the darker side of a post-apocalyptic world, like the subsequent loneliness, depression, and existentialism that comes with it. It also does a great job of making long-lasting character development, which is essential for a series that had such a long and meaningful run.
And now for one more thing.
But I think another really big reason why this show just holds up so well for so many people and created the legacy that it has is because of the world itself, the lore that it built up. While the show can give you moments that are very peaceful and nonchalant, whole episodes that are really just nothing but fun, there's this other side to it that isn't just random XD. While some people may find it overblown and over the top, or overall just a lot to take in, throughout the 10 seasons there is just so much history that we go through. How much we learn about the very distant past, all the way now to the future, and everything in between, with the catalyst of everything being the Mushroom War. How all the events that led up to that happening, how it affected people afterwards, where the world is afterwards. This cute, silly little show about a boy and a dog going on all of these adventures at the surface level just seems like an enjoyable little show. But if you got invested, if you got hooked into this show, there is so much rich, beautiful lore here that it's hard not to get sucked in. It's hard not to care about these characters, all the weird things that happen. You might meet characters with the most ridiculous names, have the most ridiculous designs, but somehow, even in its weirdest moments, it just fits for the show. Having great characters and very cool visuals is something that is always going to get someone's attention. But to give your audience something that is tangible, something to ponder over, something to study and take something away from, give them opportunities to form theories and ideas, come to their own conclusions about certain things. This is what builds something that is undeniably a cultural phenomenon. Although it did have some inconsistencies with airing and sometimes was prone to the bomb treatment, it still managed to reach a huge audience that was incredibly vocal about their love for the show. And the impact didn't stop there. Artists from the series were inspired by their time working on the show and went off to create further iconic and well-known shows that have garnered their own success in their own right. The series would also just keep bringing it home at every award ceremony, as you can imagine, being nominated for one, or sometimes more than one, Primetime Emmy every year for 10 years, and winning half of those nominations. It knocked it out of the park in both audience and critic impressions. So if the series was so freaking popular, why did it end? Well, everything's gotta end sometimes, right? I don't know what to tell you, man. If you're still angry about it ending after 10 seasons, ask yourself, will you ever be satisfied? Jokes aside, the original series really just ran its course, but of course, as HBO showed with its miniseries Distant Lands, everyone is still very much interested in seeing more of Finn, Jake, and their whole wide world of friends. It's only been a year since the miniseries ended, so it's very understandable to be hopeful and asking, what's next for our adventuring duo? And lucky you, there's an answer. HBO and Cartoon Network will be exclusively releasing a special series on the HBO Max streaming service, which will be titled Adventure Time Fiona and Cake. Retaining a lot of the same crew, the series will focus on the adventures of the Finn and Jake genderbenders Fiona and Cake. In one of the season 3 episodes sharing the same title, we got to explore an Ice King fanfiction that takes place in an alternate world where every character's gender is swapped. Based on that idea, the series will deal with hot topics like the multiverse and will feature new villains. The series, as of right now, is set to premiere sometime next year in 2023, and I'm incredibly excited to see what it has to offer. The success of Adventure Time, though, cannot be understated. Outside of the show, the biggest thing that would propel Adventure Time to literally being this cultural movement was the merch associated with it. All different types of people were fans of the show. It didn't stay tied to one demographic or another, and I single-handedly blame Adventure Time for turning Hot Topic from this, well, to this. It had appeal to such a large fan base, completely taking over the 2010s market, and helped pave the way for the rise of more shows in this manner throughout the previous decade that seemingly took over Cartoon Network. Whether you enjoyed a bunch of the shows that came from this or not is besides the point. What Adventure Time achieved has become a legacy to Cartoon Network, a movement that helped shift into the more modern style of cartoons on Cartoon Network. It continued on to carry the torch from earlier shows from the end of the 2000s, from stuff like Chowder and Flapjack, and made a massive splash in the animation space. It inspired people, it built new careers beyond it, and most of all, it made Nickelodeon question their decision to pass on the show. What are your thoughts on Adventure Time? Were you there living through the rise of it and partaking in the fandom? Were you late to the party but still jumped into it when you did, or were you never really into Adventure Time at all? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, like and subscribe, later.